Hello everyone, welcome to What If Deku Was Betrayed and Becomes Genji, the True Dragon Hero of Justice movie. Before we start, please go support 0302 for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistake in character's gender, but of course Deku is a male. After his friends betray him, Izuku will stop idolizing heroes and become the justice that the world needs, making everyone fear the dragon that was awakened by a foolish decision. Chapter 1: The Rebirth. Why? Why is such a simple question, but it is also a question which often has no answer, and this time is one of them, or at least an answer that I do not know at the moment. You might be wondering what's going on. Well, let me explain. After I had returned from the fight we had with All for One where All Might won, everything changed the moment All Might left the hospital, since just by meeting he asked me to give him his power back, something that shocked me. After I asked him why he asked me that, he told me everything. I was just used by him so that when he fought One for All he would ask me for his power to be able to recover as if nothing happened, which means that I never had the chance to be a hero. I was just someone used by his idol. I had the respect about that, but what I didn't get was the answer of why all my companions started attacking me after I gave their power to All Might. Not only my companions started attacking me, but also All Might. That is something that I had no answer to, and it is something that bothers me since after they started attacking me for no reason according to my thoughts and I escaped and they followed me, we reached a cliff where after Bakugu, my best friend, threw an explosion at me and I was very injured more than I was. I fell into the dark abyss that was below me. You may be wondering how I am still alive with the suggestions I have. That is another question that cannot be answered, but what I do know is that I am dying and it is only a matter of time before I die. But there is something I learned from what happened to me. The heroes of these times are nothing more than trash that only seeks fame and money. At that moment I understood that true heroes do not exist and that only stupid people with powers call themselves heroes. After Izuku was completely unconscious without the possibility of knowing what was happening, a person picked up Izuku and took him from the place to a place which was completely unknown. When Izuku woke up he realized that he was locked in a box of some kind, but something was wrong. He felt something different in his body. Apart from that he could now move his hands and legs, not at the moment when he was down the cliff since he could not feel either his legs or his hands. But apart from that, Izuku felt strange and tried to make movements, but before he could do so, he heard a voice that was calling him. Scientist, you might be wondering what you're doing here. Well, we found you under a cliff, almost dead, and we decided to save you. Now you're not entirely human, you're part robot, but to be more exact, you're a cyborg. We really didn't expect you to survive, but that doesn't matter anymore. Izuku, why did they do this? When Izuku said that I noticed that his voice was also different. Scientist, well, that's because you'll be our guinea pig, so be grateful that we use you, but I'll give you the chance to see your body. After the scientist said that, a machine put a mirror in front of Izuku which showed his body completely. Scientist, well, I'll give you a summary of what you'll be able to do. You'll have an improvement in your movements, you'll be faster and better, you'll go higher, you'll be stronger, you'll be faster, and you won't have to worry about resistance. Your body is charged with a battery of Mithrios which is stronger than the energy of a nuclear explosion, so it will never drain your energy. Apart from that you have more things, but you don't need to know that yet. Izuku, I don't want to be your experiment. Scientist, too late, boy. After I said that, the door of the capsule that Izuku was in opened and Izuku was able to get out, to which he came out. Scientist, on your right you have a sword and some shurikens, grab them. By the way, the shurikens are just so you know you have them since you have the ability to launch infinitely. After all, you have an automatic launcher implemented in your arm. Seeing the sword and shurikens, Izuku grabbed them and put the sword on his back. So after he looked at the shurikens he threw them a few times to test them at a target that was almost in front of him. But after making a few throws and seeing that he could see the trajectory of the shurikens when throwing them with the scope he had, after testing it, and before the scientist continued, Izuku threw a shuriken at the scientist which hit him directly in the neck, killing him. And seeing that, Izuku couldn't help but stiffen at what he had just done, but after a while he was able to simply get over it, and could see that his visor also gave him the statistics of his body. After Izuku stood still for a while, he began to think about where he was, and a screen appeared on his visor that was giving him the location where he was, and also giving him a map of how to get out of the facility. Seeing that, Izuku smiled a little because it was great. After looking at the map he started walking towards the exit, which was several floors above since they were underground. While Izuku was walking towards the exit, he could see that there were some dragon symbols around him. After he looked at a desk where behind it there was a cloth with the symbol of a green dragon, Izuku approached it and looked at a drawing of himself which above it said Genji. Izuku, so that's what they wanted to call me. I guess it's normal. After all, they didn't know what my name was and I wouldn't have used that one after all. After some time passed, Izuku arrived at the exit of the den, where he just left, and looked back, where after looking at him he only moved away a little to see how a rock was placed in the place hiding the den. Seeing that, Izuku just continued his way in the direction of his old home. Izuku, I don't need to eat. After thinking that, a notification appeared on his visor warning him about an unnecessary search for food, to which Izuku stopped thinking about it as something important, and only focused on getting to the house where his mother should be. The moment Izuku arrived at his mother's house, he was going to knock on the door, but after thinking about what he was thinking about, he looked for a window and opened it to then enter through there. But after Izuku entered the house, he noticed that something bad was happening, since there were some things thrown around, which he began to investigate. To which, after he entered his mother's room, he noticed that his mother was lying on the floor dying. When seeing that, Izuku ran to one side of her and looked at her with sadness and fear for her death. Izuku, Mom, what happened to you? Inko, Izuku, is that you? Izuku, no, I'm your cat. Yes, Mom, it's me. Inko, Izuku, it's good that you're here. Izuku, Mom, who did this to you? Inko, it doesn't matter, Izuku, I won't be able to spend more time with you, but remember that no matter what you do, I will always be proud of you. Izuku, wait, Mom, don't die. Inko, I'm sorry, my son, but I know well. After she couldn't finish those words, Inko stared into space with an empty gaze. Izuku, seeing that, he couldn't help but scream and cry, although he knew he wasn't crying since he could feel the tears. After a few hours passed, Izuku got up from the floor where his mother was and approached the bed, from which he grabbed the sheet to put it over his mother's body. After Izuku did that, he looked for the money that Izuku knew his mother had hidden, and then he went to his room to do the same. After he found all the money, he left his room and started to look around his apartment, and noticed some things like some frost, which meant that there was ice in this place, which meant that Todoroki, or someone with the power of ice, was involved in his mother's death. Izuku, Mom, I'll avenge you no matter how long it takes. After Izuku said that, he left his mother's house, and after he went up to the roof, Izuku began to use the roofs to move around the city. Izuku, Mom, I promise that I will avenge you and that I will do justice in this rotten world. While Izuku was saying, some areas of his body began to glow green. After spending a while running across the roofs, Izuku saw a clothing store that was being robbed, so he stared at the store for a while. But the moment he could see that the robbers took out a gun with which they pointed at the owner, Izuku jumped in the direction of the robbers. So when Izuku hit the ground, he was very close to the thieves, to which he just put his hand on the hilt of the sword while he was almost kneeling on one knee. Izuki, put down your weapons or die. After Izuku said that, the robber who had the gun quickly turned to where Izuku was, but just by doing so, Izuku cut off his head. After making a slash from right to left. Izuku, give it all back. The thief, seeing how his friend's body fell in the duel, tried to take out his weapon, but before that could happen, Izuku threw several of his shuriken which hit their target and killed him by cutting his throat. After Izuku sheathed his sword, he looked at the shopkeeper and gave him a nod before starting to walk towards the exit. Sir, boy, what is your name? Izuku, I am Genji. After Izuku said that, he jumped and disappeared from the man's sight, but Izuku at that moment was on the roof of the store looking at the moon. After thinking about what he had just done, Izuku smiled. When he was at UA, he couldn't help people who were stupid. After all, he wanted to be a hero, but now that he didn't want to be one, he had already saved more than his entire class, which right now most likely they're simply not doing anything. Izuku, although what day is today, how much time has passed since that day? After Izuku thought about it, his visor showed him that they were in 2021, so that was 1 year ago, which meant his class was now in their second year at UA. Izuku, if that happened a year ago, why didn't they kill my mother now? Why didn't they do it before? And not only that, they're almost in their third year. After all, there are only a few months left until 2022. Izuku, damn those bastards, they let her live and then killed her, they will pay for it, but I will not only kill them, I will make them suffer. I will make them fall into despair. Chapter 2. A New Watcher. After the previous night where Izuku saved a guy from being killed by robbers, he was looking everywhere to see if he could find more crimes. Right now, to get revenge, he wanted to take away everything they loved, and the first thing he wanted to do was become known so that he could later leave the heroes as useless in doing their job. But for that he needed crimes to happen. And at that, Izuku just stared at the city after he got on top of an apartment building. While Izuku was looking at the city, he began to look at his visor to see if there was something he could use or something he hadn't seen before that could be useful. Something he did find, since below where it said if he had damage somewhere on his body. Below that there was what looked like a type of voice controller that was moving as if someone was talking, and seeing that, Izuku became interested, since if it wasn't him, the one who was talking and was activating that, who was it? To which he tried to interact with that, and he got it after he thought about that, and just doing it he found that it was a radio. Izuku, it couldn't be simpler. After Izuku was able to listen to the radio, he found the news channel where some news was being given, but after a few minutes of watching it there was nothing important, to which he kept changing until he reached the police radio, where he stayed since they were talking about a crime that had just been committed and that the criminal was fleeing through the roofs and that they were on a certain street. Hearing this, Izuku smiled and began to move to the place where the criminal should be to catch him. While Izuku was jumping across the roofs, he was thinking about what he wanted to do. After all, although he wanted revenge, he didn't I don't know in the end what to do, whether he wanted to kill them or not, since if he killed them, he would have almost nothing left to do. But if he let them live, the only thing he could do would be to make they suffer, something that was quite tempting in question, since a death for Izuku was too good for them. While he was thinking about that, he arrived at the place where he should pass, or at least get to see the criminal that the police were chasing, and as he thought, Izuku got to see how the body of a person was traveling on the ceiling. And from what he could see, Izuku had a quirk like a spider, since every time he jumped he used a type of rope to get to another building, and seeing that, Izuku just prepared himself. To which when the criminal jumped and threw his strange rope, Izuku threw shuriken at it, which broke it and made the criminal fall to the ground, and before that Izuku only jumped to get to his position, where just by falling he put his sword on the guy's throat so that he wouldn't move. Genji, if you don't want to die, stay still. Hearing this, the criminal just stood still, until he tried to make a move to attack Izuku, who just moved quickly behind him and cut the tendons in his feet so he couldn't move, which made the criminal scream in pain. Genji, you know that such an action was stupid, yet I want to let you live, and yet you try to attack me. Be thankful that I need you alive. Criminal, and why that? Genji, nothing more than a problem. Before the criminal could answer, two figures fell from the top of the buildings, which were two very little-known heroes, but just seeing them, Izuku made a face of disgust, since his visor gave him information that these heroes had come to blow up girls. Hero, drop your weapon. Hero 2 will be arrested for the attack. Genji, nice to meet you fake heroes, my name is Genji. Hero, what a fake hero. Genji, the crimes committed are evidence of your falsehood, hero. Hero 2, who are you? Genji, apart from being false, stupid, I think I told you my name a few seconds ago. While Izuku was talking to the heroes, the criminal had started to crawl with his hands, but that didn't last long, as Izuku raised his leg and gave a piston to the criminal's head, which left him on the ground while his face was crushed against it. Hero, he will have to be arrested for using his quirk properly. Genji, quirk? What quirk? I'm not using a quirk. Saying that, the heroes turned to look at each other, but as they did, Izuku launched himself at them, punching one in the face and hitting the other with the handle of his katana, which left him unconscious from the strong blow, while the others who he punched were only stunned since he didn't hit him very hard. When Izuku saw one of the heroes fall to the ground unconscious, Izuku grabbed the other's suit collar to make Carlo towards him. Genji, little scum, tell your kind that they are no longer safe in this place, as I will unleash my wrath on the false heroes. After Izuku said that, he gave the hero a nod and then looked at the guy who was still on the ground. Genji, and you little criminal will be someone who will help me expand my name within the police, so tell them what happened. Criminal, wait, will you leave me here? Genji, calm down, the police will be here soon. After Izuku digested that, he grabbed his sword and made a symbol on the ground, which was a sword surrounded by a circle. After doing that, Izuku jumped to grab onto a ledge on the wall to make another jump, and with that reach the roof and start running from the place, before the police arrived in the area. At the moment the police arrived where the heroes were supposed to meet the criminal, what they found were two unconscious heroes and a criminal with a face of pain who was lying on the ground. To which the police put special handcuffs on the criminal, who denied him the use of his quirk. After doing that, they lifted the heroes up and began to interrogate them, although the criminal was telling them that it was Genji who attacked them. Upon hearing this, the officers more than anything believed that it was so as not to receive the blame for an attack on a hero. After the heroes woke up and told the officers everything they remembered, and that in the end they will take the criminal and everything that will happen, the other officers and heroes began to be informed about the existence of Genji. And while the police were reporting to the other heroes and police on the radio, Izuku was listening to them. Izuku, and that's how a new vigilante is born. After Izuku digested that, he jumped off the roof he was on. He made a leap of faith since he had seen a thief who stole a purse from a lady. The moment Izuku jumped, he fell on top of the man, making a sound as if something had broken. Thief, who are you? Genji, I'm Robocop, only my name is Genji and I don't help the police. Thief, why you're a vigilante? Genji, Simon. While these words were being said, Izuku was tying up the thief with a metal pipe that was in an alley. Thief, why metal? Genji, I don't know, but stop talking unless you want me to hit you so you'll shut up. Genji, you know it would leave a mark of who did this, but the truth is I'm lazy, so jar you see. After Izuku said that, he left the place while he was looking at a part of his visor that was charging as if it were a battery. But he did not give it importance, and he just left the place to be able to rest on the roof. And although he did not need to rest, the truth was that he had to think about doing just being a vigilante would be boring after all. The next day in the morning, Izuku was walking on the roofs. After all, there was no way he could hide. After a while, Izuku climbed one of the tallest buildings in the city and sat down thinking about his life. After all, not needing to sleep, eat, or drink water, his life had no more meaning than eliminating villains. After all, trying to work would be difficult after his appearance was revealed, and besides, he didn't have a house in which he could relax. After all, according to the world, Izuku Midoriya was dead. The only thing he could call home at that moment was the lair of those who turned him into a Genji, but he had no need to rest, so a guard was somewhat unnecessary. While Izuku was thinking about what he could do with his life, he could notice how the heroine known as Empty Lady became a giant to fight a villain who was also very big. Izuku, if I show up and try to help, I'll just get in the way and possibly get caught doing something that I'm really not interested in. While Izuku thought that, he just watched as the heroine tried to fight the guy who, while he was fighting, was stopped by ice, and seeing that, Izuku could only watch the battle with more interest. After all, the only hero who had ice and that he knew was Todoroki, but according to him, he still shouldn't be able to go out and do heroic acts. After all, they could only do it after they left UA, and for that a year should still pass. While he watched, he had the desire to go and take away the honor of having stopped the villain, but it wouldn't be the best idea. After all, he couldn't do much with so many heroes against him. After all, he could see how several branches came out along with the ice, which gave him the information that the hero who he didn't remember his name was in the place. After a while of watching the fight, he left the place in the direction of the lair from which he came. The moment Izuku arrived at the lair, he began to go down until he reached the place where he came from. Think of the place but without the Batmobile. But the strange thing was that he noticed that in the center of the place there was a strange platform that he hadn't noticed before, so Izuku approached it, and a robotic claw with a type of visor came out of the ceiling and began to scan him, and upon seeing it, Izuku was on guard. But after a few seconds the floor of the platform opened, and showed a motorcycle that had touches of green, but most of it was black and with white wheels. Seeing her, Izuku just smiled. But before he could do anything, the claw that had the visor was in front of him. Viewer, user 302, codename Genji, awaiting orders. Genji, my orders? Viewer, correct. Genji, can you tell me about this place? Viewer, orders accepted. Beginning explanation. This is the lair of some scientists who were weaned for being known as villains. Genji, I see. Can you tell me who I am? Viewer, you are Experiment 302, which is designed to be a weapon which is designed to finish off the villains and the heroes who stand in the way of the scientists' plans. Genji, why do you mention me so formally? Viewer, my sensors cannot sense any life other than that in the facilities, which gives me an idea of a possible death or disappearance of the scientists, which leaves you in charge. I am yours and only yours. Genji, it's okay as he is known. Viewer, scientists called me Zara. Note, references to my name as always cannot be missed, haha. Genji, I see. Can you give me better information about the facilities? Zara, understood. The facilities are made of a material harder than steel which keeps them protected, while thanks to certain levels of technology they keep them hidden. Apart from that, the facilities have several things necessary for life, such as a water tank which is refilled when it rains, food reserves. It also has rooms to rest, a training room, a community room which has a fairly large television and various things, and there are more things in the place. Genji, in this place where we are, there is exactly. Zara, this is this motorcycle which is made for her use. There is also what could be considered her other suit, and apart from those, several weapons designed for her use. Genji, another suit? Zara, the other suit is hidden behind the wall where you came from. Saying that, Izuku turned to look at the place where he had first come out and followed the tube from which he came out. Genji, can I see the suit? Zara, affirmative. After digesting that, the wall opened and then made the tube that Naruto came out of enter, and in return another identical tube came out, but that one had a black suit as a display. Seeing him, Izuku smiled. Zara, what did you think of the experimental suit 302? Genji, call me Genji. Zara, request accepted. Genji, and the suit is great. Zara, wants to exchange the suit you have now for that one. Genji, can I do that? Zara, affirmative. Change time 1 hour. Genji, I see, it would take time to do it. Zara, wants to make the change. Genji, negative. Zara, do you have any questions or requests, Genji-sama? Genji, I would like information about the UA. Chapter for the truth. Time skip 1 month. After the passage of time, more exactly a month, the vigilante Genji began to gain great fame among the heroes as a threat, and among the citizens as a hero. The Dragon Hero, as he is also known, has never been seen by any hero, which makes many of the heroes think that he is just something created by the citizens who cause some kind of illegality by using their quirks to protect themselves or something like that, and when they kill their attackers they blame Genji, who does not exist, or that is what some policemen think of as heroes, since they have never seen Genji, which at this moment is Daytab in the tallest building as usual in a crouching position while looking at the city, although more exactly an area which was more full of heroes and which is closer to the UA. But his gaze stopped looking at that area as he looked a little below him, since at this moment he could see a chase on the roofs of some houses of some villains who were being chased by heroes, and at that Genji stopped, and with his gaze down his body began to shine along with his sword, which he took out, and then let himself fall from the top, while all that could be seen was a bright green trail falling from the sky, while a figure of a green Chinese dragon was formed, and at that Genji put his sword pointing down as he fell in the direction of the villains. Genji, taste the steel of the dragon god. After saying that, he arrived where the villains were, who were covered by a cloud of smoke which made the heroes who were following them stop, but that smoke stopped at the moment in which a green dragon flew out from one part, and then turned around and entered from another part, and then came out again above the smoke with one of the villains in his mouth full of cuts which looked deep, since he was bleeding a lot. When the dragon re-entered the smoke it cleared, and only what the civilians were telling them to help them could be seen. Genji's green armor was slowly ceasing to glow, while his sword, which was still glowing, was being placed in its sheath, which had some green particles around it. Just putting away his sword, some types of prisms rose from Genji's shoulders which released some steam. which was seen by the heroes who were on guard while Genji just looked at them. While the heroes in front of him were Eraserhead, Kamui and Empty Lady, although he found it curious that Empty had not become a giant, or that Kamui had not used his quirk. Eraser, you are the Genji watcher. Faced with the question, Genji did not answer, he just remained silent while in the distance a motorcycle which left a green trail approached at full speed. Genji, heroes. The first words of Genji and the last they heard as Genji jumped back, letting himself fall from the house, which made the heroes come closer to see what had happened to him, to which they found Genji who was already on his motorcycle, which took off as if his life was in danger. And with that he jumped towards him, taking his giant form, which was thrown by many soldiers who began to notice the chase towards Genji, which began to be recorded by a helicopter that was recording something else, but in the end that was more interesting. So he started following Genji more than anything else since following the heroes was secondary. In the chase you could see how Empty Lady tried to grab Genji with her hands while he was dodging by moving with his motorcycle, until at one point he made a sharp turn which made this Empty when trying to make the same turn slip and fall to the ground, which caused a lot of damage to things, but that didn't seem to matter to her since she stopped again and started chasing Genji again, who was about to go under a bridge until he jumped off his motorcycle, which continued its path while he just rolled down the bridge and looked in a direction where there was a hero who had a gun, which who knows where it came from, which he shot him, for which Genji quickly took out his sword and returned all the bullets, and after that put his sword away and jumped back, dodging in that way wood which came out of Kamui. Kamui, stop right there. And at that Genji only took out his sword and cut Eraserhead's bandages, and after that he took out several shurikens and threw them at him, which were dodged, but after doing that in a jump a Genji which with one of his abilities arrived next to Eraserhead, which he grabbed by the face and slammed against the ground, and then lifted him up and stopped with his body the bullets of the hero above, which was left aside, and the moment in which Genji stopped Kamui's wood, which was surprised since when he sent his wood towards Genji he only stopped it with his sword, which made his wood stop moving for a moment, but he did not give it importance, which was also done by Genji, who jumped avoiding a blow from Empty Lady, which he hit Eraserhead, who was on the ground getting up. When Genji jumped he fell into Empty Lady's hand, who began to move her hand so that Genji would fall, something she failed to do and which caused Genji to start climbing up her arm, while Empty Lady tried to stop his climb by slapping herself on the arm, which she failed to do, so causing Genji to reach her shoulder, where he only jumped onto Empty Lady's back, where he pulled out his sword, thus tearing the entire back of Empty Lady's clothes, causing her to crouch down, while Genji fell to the ground, where he dodged Kamui's branches, who had arrived at the place. She only watched as Genji destroyed her branches. Genji, choose your partner's life or my capture. Kamui, his life? Genji, if you see the small cut he has. Hearing that, Kamui looked at Empty Lady's back where he could see a little blood. Genji, my sword has poison, in a few minutes he will die, so choose my capture or your life. You can attack me and try to capture me, something that is not at all assured, or take your partner to a hospital and save her. Hearing that, Kamui just looked at him for a moment without saying anything. Genji, tick-tock, time is running out, tree boy. Hearing that, Kamui ran towards Empty Lady, who cried since she had heard everything. And while that was happening, Genji jumped onto a roof where he disappeared after jumping off a ledge. Kamui, upon arriving at Empty Lady's side, looked at his wound and realized that it was just paint, which made him look back at Genji before, and then, when he couldn't see him, he looked up and shouted something that was heard throughout a large part of the city. But while Genji was walking calmly on the roofs, he was thinking about what was going to happen in a few days at the UA, since he was thinking about his first attack, which would not be direct. It would be an indirect attack which could not be related to him. The only objective of this attack would be to lower the ego along with what people thought of the UA, and that was very simple to do by creating an attack on the UA or doing something without them realizing it would leave the UA as incompetent, and little by little they would begin to distrust it, and that would make all the students suffer in their futures as heroes. At that, Genji stopped on the roof he was on and began to head towards the UA, where he would begin to make plans to slowly finish off the entire UA. When Genji reached his objective, he just started to observe the school, since he knew that before he could get to it an alarm would start ringing, and that would not be good at all. Although those thoughts were discarded the moment he saw a student wanting to enter the academy, he hurried towards him and after reaching his side he activated his camouflage ability. Note: I don't know if I had said it, but what Izuku's armor does is camouflage itself, not become invisible, which is why it is similar to what Tsuyu does. So he entered with the student without any problem, although he did not stop there since Genji stole the student's wallet, which he would only steal. He opened it and found the UA card that was given to all students, and with that Genji left him his wallet and just left the place. As Genji ran through the place, he took care of more security cameras until he reached the area where the room was that was full of computers and batteries that kept most of the school's energy. So when he entered it after he put the code on the door panel, which was easy when his armor illuminated it with ultraviolet light, you could see which were the numbers that they always put, so he only had to discover the order, which although more difficult, he only had to see which one looked the cleanest, and which one didn't, since if they had entered on that day the cleanest would be the first number while the last would be the one that would look the dirtiest, or rather the most used. After Genji opened the door, he entered the place where he found many computers and things to maintain the security of the school apart from secret files and all that, and at that Genji's visor shined something. Before Genji moved quickly to take everything he could from the computers, which he achieved, but something that made Genji smile and at the same time get angry was the video from the security cameras of his own betrayal. From what he could see, they had stolen all the videos so that they could not be accused. That bothered him, but he didn't do anything reckless and just took it all in. The fall of the UA would be slow. If he revealed this in light of a blow, the UA would fall too quickly in one blow. He didn't want that. Genji wanted all his so-called friends and his so-called idol to fall into an abyss full of despair similar to the one he fell into that day, with the only difference that when they tried to get out of this abyss, the only thing that would happen would be that they would fall again, thus falling into despair for not being able to get out. When Genji finished taking everything that the UA had, he left the place without putting some chemicals on all the electrical in the room, which would destroy everything without there being a chance to confirm that it was someone else or that it was an attack. At that, Genji just moved a little back to where the darkness of the night was, thus disappearing from the scene, while in front of him all the lights of the UA went out and turned red. Chapter 5. When Genji arrived at his lair, he began to review all the information he could get from the UA, and with that he discovered who had given those fake videos of him, and how the UA found out that the videos were fake. But even knowing that, he wanted those who called themselves his friends to fall for what they did to him. After all, they did not trust him, even though they had been with him for a long time, and also as revenge for his mother, although his revenge would not stay there, and the League of Villains would also pay for their actions. After all, they were guilty of much of what happened to him. When Izuku was reviewing all the secret material of the UA, it was what he was looking for. He didn't want to leave anything aside. Everything would be relevant in due time. As time passed, Izuku finished with all the great content of information that he had to have analyzed. When he looked at everything, he discovered more things like that certain girls cried for him every night. That on one hand bothered him. After all, he still had human feelings, and in the face of that he decided that although he would not hit these girls, he would not forgive them, and his punishment would be that his guilt would continue to attack his mind not only at night but during the days. When everything was seen by Izuku, he entered all the information into the lair's computer and asked that everything that could be used to make the UA students look bad be filed in another folder. An order which was followed by the computer, which began to analyze all the content and little by little begin to fill a folder with all that information. When Izuku saw that the folder was beginning to be filled, he got up from the chair he was in, but before leaving the lair, he gave an order to the computer again. Izuku, when you finish, look for information about the League of Villains. They will be eliminated one by one. Look for everything about each of them, weaknesses, strengths, likes, dislikes, so that there is nothing left of them that we cannot find. Zara, right away. After saying this, Izuku began to leave the lair in an unknown direction, although it was obvious that he was heading to the city to kill more criminals, help people, and become not only more famous but more acclaimed by civilians and more hated by heroes. Time skip 1 week. The passage of a week was enough for all the information that Zara was looking to be gathered in different folders with names of each person in the League of Villains. Everything that could be found was in them. The main leaders of the League of Villains were there. Each folder named by their names was in place with their strengths and weaknesses apart from their quirks and places which they frequent. Genji, Zara, I want you to give me Kurojire's folder. When Izuku said that, a folder was placed in front of Izuku, who took it and began to read it. When he finished reading it, he stood up from the chair he was sitting in. Izuku, first we will finish off their means of transportation. After saying that, Naruto started walking, but before getting on his motorcycle he gave another order. Izuku, Zara, I want you to send me everything you know about Shoto Todoroki. Zara, right away. When Izuku heard that, he got on his motorcycle and left the den. While he was on his motorcycle, on the interface on his helmet he could see how the path to his destination was marked. While Izuku was on his way to where Kurojire should be, he began to observe some things that the folder that Zara gave him showed about the information of his former bipolar partner, and how he could make him fall from the top. After all, he was one of the obvious ones who had attacked his mother. When Izuku arrived at the place where Kurojire should be, which was a bar like the one they had attacked a long time ago. Genji, so the best way to finish off Kurojire is to destroy that metal thing. This will get out of hand, but as it should continue, the fact that there are bad people in that place is most likely, so many will die. This will be a hard blow for years. The heroes achieve something that they have not achieved in more time. When Izuku saw a villain leaving the bar, he quickly jumped across the roofs, and when the villain entered an alley, Izuku jumped on him, causing the villain to fall to the ground while he had Izuku on top of him. Genji, hello? When the villain heard Genji's voice, he quickly used his quirk, which was summed up in the power to spit acid from his mouth. When the villain activated his quirk, Genji quickly jumped back away from the villain. Genji, well, give me the information I want and you won't die. It's a very good offer, don't you think? Villain, I won't give you anything. When the villain said that, he launched a jet of acid from his mouth towards Genji, who jumped towards a wall which he held on to thanks to a shuriken which he used as if it were an ice axe. Genji, well, I'll make you another offer. If you give me the information I want, your death will be very, very quick. How do you like the deal? The villain this time did not give any kind of response and only threw more acid from his mouth, to which Izuku began to jump from wall to wall until he climbed to the ceiling, where he began to run until he was on the villain's back, where he threw some shurikens at his back which hit the villain in it, who screamed. When Izuku heard the villain scream, he jumped off the roof and began to approach the villain from behind until he turned around and tried to throw acid from his mouth. But Izuku quickly approached the villain and closed his mouth with a blow to his jaw from below, which made the villain have to cough up the acid that he couldn't spit out when he was sent to the ground by the blow. Seeing that, Izuku just approached the villain and grabbed him by the neck while he tried to get away or use his quirk, which wasn't possible because they were squeezing his throat. Genji, so? You will give me information. The villain, upon hearing this, just agreed. Seeing that, Genji released the villain and took out his sword. Genji, well, I want to know who is inside the bar you left. After a few minutes he had passed where the villain gave all the information he could to Genji, he alone jumped to the roof after cutting the villain's neck to be able to observe the bar where Kurojire was again. Genji, bad security, bad villains and idiots with big egos. What can you expect from this MMM, or already, their deaths? When Izuku stood looking at the bar for a while, plotting an attack plan which had as its main objective to enter silently and quickly destroy the metal device that kept Kurojire in control and then kill him. After all, according to the computer, Kurojire is like a type of gnome created from a human who studied at the UA. In the end, that didn't matter, he would die no matter his past. After all, he was a problem. With the plan in mind, Genji quickly left the place to look for a trench coat that would cover his entire body so he could enter the bar without any problem until it was late enough for him to be stopped, or even Kurojire could survive. When Izuku returned to the bar, he entered with his trench coat and entered as if nothing had happened, although he did notice how most of the people in the place were looking at him, but that he didn't stop him, and he sat at the bar where he asked Kurojire for a glass of wine which Kurojire began to prepare, and he focused on the wine which gave Genji the perfect opportunity. Genji, taste the steel of the dragon god. All the villains around the guy who had entered could notice how this guy said some words that they didn't understand in a low voice, but instantly the guy who had entered the bar, as if nothing had happened, began to glow green, which was a very good sign, so we quickly tried to get up, but when we thought about it, it was too late. We could see how a sword came out at speeds that we could barely see, leaving behind a green trail. Several of us could assure that this trail formed the head and body of a dragon, but although many of us could see it, we would never accept it. When Izuku unleashed all his power in his body, everything went slow for him, which allowed him to unsheath his sword that he had put on his waist at high speed while he directed it at Kurogyri, who had not even turned around to see him, and as if it were a burning knife he began to slice the piece of metal that kept Kurogyri controlled as if it were butter. When the diagonal slash split the device, Genji quickly moved his sword and began to spin around while the energy of his sword began to destroy everything around him as he continued spinning until he reached Kurogyri again, who was sending random things because he could no longer control his strange smoke. When Izuku's sword touched Kurogyri's body, it did not disappear, which gave the sword the opportunity to pierce Kurogyri, although Izuku could not see if Kurogyri died, since when he finished the turn the bar exploded as if a grenade had been thrown inside it, to which Izuku quickly put away his sword and left the bar, while from time to time he threw one or another shuriken at some villains who tried to leave the bar or escape. After that he will be on a roof again watching the old bar burn from the explosion that most likely caused the energy that destroyed the place before the explosion with the turn he had made. His observation ended when he noticed a news helicopter approaching the place, and he quickly left the place, leaving the rest of the things to the heroes, who should not take much longer. With an Izuku already on his motorcycle, he was thinking about what would be the best way to attack his next target, which was his former classmate and ex-friend. In the end, his thoughts stopped, and the only thing he could think of was attacking him directly and making him confess his actions, and then, after recording everything, making it known to the world, thus destroying the opinion towards him, making his murder no longer seen as so bad. After all, although he has killed villains, he couldn't just kill for the sake of killing. That would be detrimental to his goals. With that in mind, Izuku started his motorcycle and headed towards UA in search of his former classmate. After some time passed, Izuku was able to infiltrate the UA again, where he began to search all over the place for Todoroki. When I found him, I realized that something hadn't changed. After all, he was training as usual. Genji, despite being called a genius, you are such an idiot with the use of your quirk. When Todoroki heard those words, he quickly turned around and found Genji, who quickly put him in his lair. Genji, keep up? Ha, that won't do. Todoroki, why do you say that? Genji, it's not obvious there is an infinity between the two: skill, power, knowledge, experience, intelligence. Do you want me to continue? You have no chance. Chapter 6. When Izuku finished saying that, Todoroki just frowned. Todoroki, I never thought you would attack aspiring heroes. Genji, aspiring hero? Do you still consider yourself that? You and many of your classmates can't even be considered aspiring heroes. Todoroki, why do you say that? Genji, isn't it obvious? I wonder again if they actually just gave you more merits than they really should have. But answering your question, doesn't the name Midoriya Izuku ring a bell? Todoroki, upon hearing the name mentioned to him, just remained silent, although he was going to try to speak and say that it was just a mistake on everyone's part since they didn't know that his betrayal was a lie. Genji, or better yet Midoriya Inko's name. At the mention of the green-haired boy's mother this time, Todoroki opened his eyes wide while his body froze. Todoroki, you? Genji, lose everything. Shoto Todoroki, how both you and Katsuki Bakuga killed the mother of Izuku Midoriya, also known as Inko Midoriya. Tell me how it feels to be what you once swore to stop. Todoroki, how do you know that? Genji, when I found out about Izuku, it seemed strange to me that someone like him is a villain or an infiltrator or something like that, so I started to investigate, and I found some things. Do you really think you can be a hero with your sins? Or did you think that by doing good things your sins would be forgiven? Ha 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 ha, no, sins are not forgiven unless there is a good reason, and you didn't have a good one. How does it feel to be worse than your father? How does it feel to be the same or worse than a villain? Todoroki, upon hearing this, just took a few steps back. Todoroki, I didn't want to do it. Izuku, or if I didn't want to, I didn't know what I would do. It was an accident. I tripped. I arrived at Izuku's house and used my ice and fire against his mother. Yes, it was just an accident. They always happen. Accidents don't exist. Note: when there's a reference, I will put it in bold. This will be implemented in all my stories from this point onwards. Genji began to walk slowly towards Todoroki, who moved away from him. With each step he took, the tension of the environment increased. Although Todoroki didn't know everything, it was being broadcast all over Japan, from television to cell phones and computers. Absolutely everyone who was using some technological device could see what was happening right now. When Genji positioned himself in front of Todoroki and the latter could no longer move backwards because of a wall, he could only see how Genji looked at him from behind that helmet, or that was what he thought, since Izuku was only observing how he was observing himself from the perspective of other people. Genji: so tell me, Shoto Todoroki, aspiring hero of the UA Academy, how does it feel to have killed not only another aspiring hero but also his mother and a civilian who should have been protected not only by the heroes, but by the aspiring heroes? After all, that is their duty. Tell me, how does it feel that many heroes, most of them UA teachers, hid the death of Inko Midoriya as an attack by villains when they knew that those responsible were 2 of their students, and yet they not only hid but also altered that information. With that last thing said, Izuku walked a few steps away from Todoroki, who fell to the ground just looking at the ground while being seen by many people, although he didn't know that. Genji: didn't that affect you? Even knowing that you killed what you swore to protect, it didn't affect you? You care so little about people that you would kill anyone just for your own good? For your revenge? Many people, most of whom were watching from their homes, working or on the street, had an annoyed look at what they heard. The only exceptions were Shoto's family, who looked at this information with disappointment. Even his father, who knew that up to this point he couldn't do anything, although besides them, the heroes were the ones who remained angry, but he didn't do it for Todoroki, but for Genji, since this would affect everyone, and not just Todoroki, but also those who were at the UA. Todoroki, you're attacking me for killing a civilian, but you've killed many more people than me. Genji, that's your argument, accepting your sins and then trying to override my actions to make me feel bad or look bad. How pathetic. Todoroki, what? Genji, unlike you, I am not a hero, but despite that, I behave more like one after everything I have done. It makes sense to kill villains to protect people, but tell me, what is the point of killing a woman who had not committed any crime? What is the point of killing a civilian, an innocent person? Todoroki, but you also kill. Genji, you have only shown that you had no need to kill, and yet you did it. I repeat, I killed for a greater good. Tell me what your excuse is. Before the aspiring hero's exposure to the world could continue, the training area was invaded by the heroes in charge of the UA along with the director of the same. Everything being recorded and continuing to be broadcast to the entire society. Among all the heroes that were there, the most important one was, with the rest, the ancient symbol of peace, which, although it was still loved, no longer had the same power and effectiveness that it had before. And the best part for Izuku is that he knew that he would come up with a pretty epic phrase according to him to stop him, which would give him the perfect opportunity to tarnish this ancient symbol even more than he had already left it after having given the information about his mother's death and how the UA heroes tried to hide that information from the public. When all the heroes entered the training area and set their eyes on Genji, he only looked at them, although holding part of his gaze on Todoroki since he knew that he could attack him. Genji, wow, the heroes have arrived. Will they try to save the situation? Oh, sorry, I mean they will try to save how they are seen publicly. Midnight, boy, you're going to have to give up if you don't want to get hurt. Genji, I don't know what surprises me more, that you say that phrase with the certainty that I am the one who is trapped, or that you say it in such a serious way when the pose you are doing does not help much in it. Snipe, you're trapped with us right now, you have nowhere to run, so surrender, Genji. Genji, you don't understand, I'm not locked in with you, you're locked in with me. Alright, boy, your crimes must be judged. Genji, what right do you have to say that? Not only did you attack a boy who was supposedly a traitor based on information of dubious origin, but you also covered up the murder of some students. Who is worse? The one who kills criminals or the one who covers up the death of an innocent civilian at the hands of his students? Nizu, Where did you get all that information? Genji: well, infiltrating the UA and stealing all of its information has its benefits, although now that I think about it, there's a phrase that fits you guys perfectly. Even me, either you die a hero or you live long enough to become a villain. Nice phrase, right? Although none of those present at the UA knew it, everywhere where people could be seen watching the entire broadcast was silent, in which no one dared to speak because of the commotion caused by the information that was currently being revealed. After all, not only was their symbol the greatest hero they had ever known, but several heroes had been accomplices in a murder, or rather in two murders, one of a former UA student and the other of an innocent civilian with no connection to the heroes other than her son. On the UA grounds it was not so different. Everyone was completely shocked, both students and some UA workers. After all, many did not know that Katsuki Bakugo and Shoto Todoroki had murdered the mother of the one they called a traitor, and that apart from that, the UA heroes hid that information from society. As Genji's plan was all planned out, the credibility in the UA was falling, and with it the credibility of the heroes of this same one, along with the possibility of being a hero to two students of the UA, and apart from that, in the destruction of the dreams of these same students. He only had to continue throwing more information of questionable acts, and the popularity of the heroes in society would fail, and with that the government would take action against them, only leaving the villains as enemies in this way. And when many powerful villains fell, the others would cower from the great possibility of dying by giving up or trying to leave everything that means being a villain. After all, most people fear death. Genji: then tell me, heroes, what heroic act will you do now? You will kill me and then try to hide all the evidence, and with me you will kill all those who discover the truth or who know it. If that is the case, what differentiates you from the villains? How funny, don't you think it is? Different names but same acts. The straw that broke the camel's back was those simple, final words which caused the heroes to attack first, making their fury known and giving even more credibility to Genji's words. Genji: and just as it was planned, that's how it turned out. Genji's gaze turned to the bullets that were fired by the sniped hero, which were completely deflected by Genji's katana, which after having deflected the bullets he put away his katana and threw 3 shurikens at the approaching heroes, which were All Might and Eraser, which dodged the shurikens. Genji: 7 heroes and a weird thing as director. All Might's short and medium range, Eraser head short and medium range, Midnight support, Ectoplasm short range, number 13 medium range, Present Mike long and medium range, and Snipe long range. While Izuku's thoughts were in action, both All Might and Aizawa came to be a few meters away from him, at which point All Might prepared a blow while Aizawa activated his quirk. When the blow of the symbol of peace was moving towards Genji, he dodged it, and noticed all the damage that the symbol of peace had received after all the time it had passed. After all, if before it was already seen that it had declined in power, now it was even more noticeable how his body was in a bad state. When Genji was dodging, he managed to hear a curse from Eraser, most likely because he couldn't erase a quirk that doesn't exist, which allowed Genji, at the moment of dodging the blow from the symbol of peace, to hit his weak point, the wound caused by All for One, not only causing him to scream in pain but also making him fall to the ground while holding the wound. Genji: if it weren't for my body I wouldn't have done so much damage, but leaving the symbol of peace as an ineffective opponent in combat would only leave 6 heroes and a strange thing and a student with psychological problems. Chapter 7. In the dormitory area of the UA, all the students of Class 1A were watching as the fight had just started, and how after only a few minutes of it the first to fall was All Might, also some like Momo, Ojiro, Kirishima, Sato, Shoji or Tokoemi could perfectly notice how the other heroes in the place retreated and took a more defensive position than before, which made them understand that they had underestimated Genji. Mina: the guard is so cool but I don't like him. Jiro: it would be the most normal thing when not only has Silo just revealed information about the UA that not even we knew, but he also beat up our teachers, killed criminals, and apart from this he is leaving the heroes and the entire UA into bad light. Mineta: do you think he's coming for us? Toru: I hope not. If no one has been able to confront him yet, I don't know what to expect if he won't attack. Lita: we must have confidence in our teachers. Tsuyu: since I think about it, has anyone seen Bakugo? Uraraka: I hope he's not going to try to fight. While the conversation continued in the dormitories of Class 1A of the UA and that in Dormitory 1B there was a similar one in the training area, and where the heroes were with Genji, the battle had stagnated with the Genji looking at a kneeling symbol of peace and the rest of the heroes being on the defensive. Genji, you know, we live in a society where the hierarchy of the past no longer exists. Everyone lives in a similar way. In this society, now more than ever, people crave the power to rule over others, and their way of achieving such a form is in the form of their quirks. The powerful have power, fame, money. Those who do not have power receive ridicule, contempt, and of course fear, a fear which is attempted to be calmed by the heroes who only show that power is everything, to be something, to be someone. All Might Ko how? Genji, how to make it simple. Instead of people fearing the powers, make them fear a person, that is, me. Fear is a force to be reckoned with. I don't want to be a new symbol of peace, I want something bigger, a symbol of justice. The bad guy punished, the good guy rewarded, simple, right? All Might, you would be the same as a villain. Genji, no, it would be better light and darkness together, the ways of villains, but the goal of heroes perfection, balanced, perfectly balanced as everything should be. When Genji said that, he put one of his knees on the ground while he was in front of the kneeling All Might, who was looking at the viewer. Genji, years of heroes, and even with them the evil has not ended. That has only one meaning. It's quite easy to find the answer, isn't it? With those last words, Genji got up from the ground and looked at the other heroes of the place, but any attempt to move or to say any word was interrupted by the appearance of a walking bomb. Katsuki, you damn! Genji, look who arrived, the King of Rome. What are you here to do? Oh wait, let me guess, he wants to kill me like you killed your mother's friend, or rather, the mother of your childhood friend. Katsuki, shut up and die. As Katsuki said that, he fired his explosions at Genji, who began to speak before he reached him. Genji, I don't know how the UA allows a student like you in their volatile academy. You are a danger to society, and yet the UA cares so little about that, and only cares about the power of your quirk, its potential. How pathetic! The worst of all is that it is wasted on you. What good is great power when you don't have the mind to use it? When Katsuki was reaching Genji's side, he just moved to the left and took Katsuki's raised right arm and then slammed him into the ground like he did in his first combat test at UA, but now with the difference that on the ground he crushed his head with his foot. Genji, as predictable as ever. As Katsuki was getting up from the ground, Genji stepped aside and let him do so while Katsuki's hands let out several explosions. Katsuki, I'll kill you, I'll kill you, I'll kill you, I'll kill you. Genji, did killing Inko make a fetish appear? You're weird. You know you're completely everything like a villain rather than an attempt at a second-class hero? No, second is too much. I'd say 10th class, yes, 10th is more at your level. Before the UA heroes could stop Bakugo from doing something stupid, he launched an attack again. Katsuki, I'll show you why I can be a hero, die. Again, like the first time, Katsuki attacked with his right hand, but before he could reach Genji, the latter put his palm to his right and gave an explosion with which he propelled himself into the air, turned and then attacked Genji's left side with an explosion from his left hand, but before he could hit Genji, the latter crouched, causing all the force of the explosion to pass over him and formed a fist with his right hand which was next to his body. Genji, low blow. After saying that, Genji gave an uppercut to Bakugo's crotch which made all the men who saw that blow grimace in pain while they brought their hands to their crotch. When Genji separated his fist from his parts, Katsuki's body began to fall to the ground. Genji, I tried your wife. When Katsuki fell to the ground, foam he was coming out of his mouth while his eyes were completely white. Genji, one more punishment for my mother's death, although he deserves more punishment than that, and his dream of being a hero being impossible, maybe an accident, should happen to him. After a few seconds of seeing Katsuki's body lying on the ground, Genji turned around and saw the heroes. Genji, how about a deal on leaving? You guys heal and check on your teammates, and everyone's happy? Does that sound good to you? The heroes wanted to protest, but they knew that none of them could fight at full capacity, knowing that 2 students and 1 hero were not in the best way to fight at the moment, and that being on the battlefield would only make it more complicated for them, leading to the possibility of harming them and being used as hostages or something similar. Nizu, we have a deal. With those last words he had created a chain reaction which would lead to the hero's own destruction. When Izuku left after throwing a smoke bomb, the transmission was completely cut off for the entire society, which was angry with the heroes for the information he obtained. The UA lost credibility, and the heroes who were involved in the battle zone in the UA began to be viewed with distrust for having let Genji escape. Apart from being quite repudiated by society for having covered up the death of a civilian, and more so when it was learned that what had been said before the death of Inko Midoriya had been reported to the police and the government as an attack by a villain. From that day on, the domino effect began to grow longer and longer. After all, with the distrust of the UA heroes came the distrust of the other heroes, and with them the repudiation of the heroes who were not in the UA also began to be born. The people demanded the government and the UA to expel and sanction, or rather imprison, the murderers of the mother of the false traitor of the UA, and with them the students of the UA began to be seen as possible dangers in the future. 2 weeks had passed since that day when the information was revealed by Genji to society, and a whole domino effect so large at a national level occurred. The government took action against Katsuki Bakugo and Shoto Todoroki, removing them from the UA and not allowing them to be heroes, and apart from that with a permanent record with their crimes, although they were never given jail time for being minors or something like that, they said, but that didn't matter. They were recognized at a national level and with it repudiated by Japan for their actions. In all that time in which the domino effect began, Genji only concentrated on helping society, as a hero should do, but in a more extremist way, by killing villains, earning more and more fame, making his words have more weight in society every day that passed with each time he helped. Apart from that, the crimes began to go down as Genji thought because of the fear of dying at his hands by criminals. The only ones left were those who were arrogant enough to think that they would be able to defeat him, or ignorant enough to think that they could hide from him while doing their criminal acts. In those weeks, although Genji thought about how to get revenge on his former classmates, he finally decided that he would leave revenge and would simply settle for having possibly ruined the possibility of being a hero for each one of them. Although there was the possibility that he would get a little more revenge against Bakugo and Todoroki while he left the others. At this moment Izuku was at his base, where he was next to the computer researching his next target, which would be a villain from the League of Villains, more exactly Dabi the Blue Match. All the computer was doing was finding everything it could about him, no matter how minimal or insignificant the information seemed. Everything that could be obtained about him apart from the files that the UA had on him was welcomed or supposedly useful to Izuku, who wanted to finish off the League of Villains not only as quickly as possible but also as simply as possible. The less fighting he could get from each member the better for him, since his own objectives would arrive sooner, and also, dealing with the League of Villains was annoying, so it was better to finish quickly. While the computer was focused on searching for information about Dabi, the creation that had been made a week earlier by Zara was being tested by Izuku, which was a second AI to be able to do work without the need for Zara so that she could concentrate on something else, or simply to have a second AI as a backup for the first. Since he didn't know what to call her, Izuku gave her the first name that would come to him, and Alice was the final name of his second AI, along with Zara, and Alice began to do various things while Zara stayed researching Dabi. Alice was helping him with certain improvements to his suit, apart from also making various necessary adjustments. After the hours passed, Zara had finished her investigation, and with that she had given all the information to Izuku, who put her to investigate even more and to order his next attacks on the other members of the League of Villains, while he left Alice to rest in case he needed her while he was outside, leaving one AI working and the other waiting for orders. Chapter 8. While Izuku was as usual, he was on the roof of one of the nearby houses looking for his target, who should be in the area where he was with the heroes. A meeting was taking place with the government, where more than a meeting it was a discussion where the only thing they did was separate more, since the members of the government were upset with the heroes for how things were going. After all, they charged at the expense of the heroes, which when they were paid a percentage was taken from them that was given to the members of the government, which were specified in being a public face within the government on behalf of the heroes. So in the end, if the heroes have a problem, they were in charge of helping them or fixing it. And at this moment, with the current situation in society, not only were the heroes being targeted but also the members of the government who are at that moment in the meeting. While the heroes were also upset, some with the members of the government because they were upset with them, and others with several heroes who all had something in common, and that was what they worked at the UA. The annoyance in everyone was quite a lot, and more so since the members of the government reported that plans were being made to lower the budget of the heroes due to all the comments from society, which was causing what the heroes and the government earned to decrease by a fairly large amount. At the moment it was known that it would be lowered by at least 20% per prisoner, and this could still be lowered if the public situation continues as it is now or even worsens more than it already is. When the whole place calmed down from the fruits of frustration they were releasing, they began to look for a solution which would not only fix the situation but would also end Genji without earning any more of the people's wrath. All Might, the best way to make the situation better is by defeating Genji. He is the leader of everything, as he said. He wants to become a symbol. If that symbol does not exist, society will ask for heroes again. Empty lady. It seems like we're talking like villains when we talk about eliminating a person in such a way. Sir Nightai, right now everyone affiliated with the UA is being seen as accomplices of villains or criminals. Ryukyu, the boy is smart, good at fighting, powerful and has the support of the people. Eraser, he has all the pieces in his favor right now. The worst thing is that nothing can be done against his quirk. Those words caught the attention of everyone in the room. Mirko, what do you mean? Eraser, when we were at UA I used my quirk against him and it didn't work, which gives two options, either he's somehow immune to my power or he doesn't have a quirk. Snipe, both are bad. Midnight, if you have, find a way to counteract Aizawa's power. Number 13, and if he doesn't have everything he's done, he's achieved it without a quirk, which makes him even more incredible, and if society finds out about that, he'll be seen even more as an example or an idol. Mirko, it doesn't matter which option, they are both bad. Endeavor, before thinking of a way to defeat him you should think about who he is. Ectoplasm, the problem with that is we don't know how to do it. Present Mike, we should find it, and get information or look for a way to find information without running into it. Hawks, I could try to find him. Kamui, it wouldn't be a bad idea. We won't know what actions he would take if he saw you besides that information. Do you know what else he could have gotten out of the UA? Vlad, well, he took out all the ones that were in the UA according to the director, and if that is so then it has many things from strengths and weaknesses of the heroes that are there as well as the names and existence of each student of the place. Cementas, they will also have information on several villains, right? All Might, it is possible that he wants to finish off more villains that we had information about. After all, they are dangerous. That will help him more to his objectives. Bubble Girl, sir, what do you think? Sir Nightai, we must move carefully. We do not know what other information Genji has and what he can use to find us. The conversation was in full swing, but at the most inopportune moment a policeman arrived at the meeting, quickly entering the room, which caught the attention of all the heroes, who noticed his agitation. Turin, what's happening? Police, you have to watch the news right now. Jando, the police said that the television that was in the living room turned on the news where you could see how a news helicopter was recording a part of the city where suddenly a large blue flame of fire not only destroyed several houses in the area but also made a large part of the area turn black. When the fire disappeared, the camera pointed to the area where the fire had appeared, finding the shirtless form and some cuts that made several rivers of blood run down his body. This image of Dabi will be shown to anyone who watches the news. When the camera pointed to the other point, it showed how Genji was emerging from some rubble. The only thing that could be seen was that his armor was scratched and a little dirty despite having been inside that great blaze of fire. News. Apparently the self-proclaimed vigilante is facing the villain known as Dabi. You can see how they are talking. We will try to get closer to be able to hear what they say. All the heroes in the room could see how the helicopter came down and a girl came out of it, who, along with a cameraman, approached the two fighters. When they got to their sides, they didn't say anything and just let everyone hear what they were saying. Genji, then tell me how it feels. Dabi, what are you talking about? Genji, isn't it obvious? How does it feel that even though your father is a hero, you have become a villain? Dabi, hearing this, just narrowed his eyes and blue fire began to come out of his hands. Dabi, I don't know what you're talking about. All the people who were watching at this moment what was happening paid more attention since it was getting very interesting since Genji revealed what the UA did. Now it is seen as something sublime that Genji reveals information since it is quite revealing. Genji, let me refresh your memory. Todoroki, it feels like even though your father is the number 2 hero, you are a villain. Dabi's fists clenched, and with it the fire that was in them began to cover both of their arms. In the room where the heroes were with the members of the government, Endeavor got up from his chair and hit the office table with his fists while looking at Dabi in disbelief. But while that was happening in the hero's room with Dabi, he could see how Genji put his hands on the hilt of his katana. Genji, Shoto Todoroki's eldest son, with what he did, I'm not surprised that they are related. Dabi, that's not true, you're an. Genji, I protest, you haven't answered my question, remember? Before anyone made a move or Dabi answered, the reporter who was on the scene revealed herself and approached Genji, who looked at her. Genji, do you know that being here is dangerous? Reporter, yes, but please say a few words to all the people who are listening and watching you. Genji, a weapon is carried with courage. When he said that, he tightened his grip on the hilt of his sword. Genji, he draws his sword with reason. With that said, Izuku unsheathed his sword and spun it around, then put one leg in front and one behind, while he placed his katana with the tip facing behind his back while he was on his left side, while he grabbed it with his right hand and the left was close to the blade with 3 shurikens ready to be thrown. Think of the Zenitsu stance for his breathing. Genji, it is used with justice. When he said this, his entire body began to be enveloped by several green rays which as quickly as they appeared, they disappeared while several parts of his body began to glow green, causing each small movement of his body and sword to release a small green trail. Genji, and it is kept with honor. Just after saying that, Genji shot forward at a very high speed, and although Dabi launched a flame from his hands, Genji dodged it by jumping to his left where he began to run along the wall. While Izuku was running along the wall, flames and fireballs rained down on him from Dabi, who couldn't hit him with his hands and stop his movement. When he was running along the wall, Genji jumped and landed on the roof of a house where he continued running, dodging the blue fire, while each time he passed the trail he was releasing became larger than before, showing that the more time passed the faster he moved. Although difficult to see with the naked eye thanks to the trail, it was easier to see that Genji's speed was increasing with each second he passed running. At one point Genji jumped to the ground where he rolled to avoid a flame and then approached Dabi, who took a few steps back, but the slash that Tenny made with his sword managed to make a wound in his chest which was the largest he had so far. After making the slash and giving that cut, Genji jumped back, and at that moment he threw the shurikens that he already had in his hand which stuck in Dabi's right leg, who only grimaced at the pain, while Genji began to run around Dabi, who was only following him with his gaze while one of his hands remained on the cut that he made him, although that ended when Dabi put his 2 palms facing the ground and expelled fire which began to cover the entire ground around him. Seeing that, Izuku quickly grabbed a large piece of sheet metal which had come out of the house they destroyed earlier and ran in front of the reporter and the camera guy, covering them with the sheet metal while the latter just stood there, leaving the sheet metal in place as the blue fire ran along the sides of it. Which was recorded by the guy with the camera who, although scared, did not stop doing his job while he reported it and talked about unimportant things. Genji, well, this is where the report on the ground ends. How about you go to the helicopter? Report, of course, thank you. The words hung in the air as the cameraman and reporter headed for the area where there was no fire to their helicopter to record everything from an aerial point of view. When Izuku saw them leave, he just sighed mentally and then pushed the sheet which was already melting towards where Dabi was, who stopped expelling fire to dodge the flying sheet. Genji, well, shall we dance? Chapter 9. When Genji's words reached Dabi's mind and he analyzed them, he simply began to release fire from his hands while Izuku only began to dodge the blue flames that Dabi released. Dabi, stop dodging. Genji, this is boring. Don't you know how to do anything else? Genji's approach was fast, while the times that Dabi threw large flames at him he received them directly. After all, when it was a flame in such a large area, the fire was less concentrated and was not as dangerous, while the concentrated flames were easy to dodge. In the end it was a lose for Dabi, who noticed how Genji was getting closer, and while Izuku got closer he moved away to put distance in the fight. While the battle was still at a point where Dabi couldn't do much when his flares had no effect or were simply dodged, the heroes were watching the screen closely to analyze everything, possible quirk, fighting style, anything that would give them some clue as to who it could be. All the analysis that was being done by the heroes stopped the moment they saw how Genji had arrived at Dabi's side. When Izuku arrived at the side, the first thing he did was a hit with his palm in Dabi's face, which moved his face back from the hit he was given. Putting his palm close to Izuku's body, he was about to explode a flame, but his hand was taken by Genji, who pointed it upwards, which made the blue flame go out towards the sky where there was no damage to the area or to Izuku himself, which after that lowered his arm after having grabbed Dabi's hand, putting his elbow to give him a hit with this, which was dodged by Dabi, who moved away a few steps and launched with both hands a flame of fire which hit Genji directly, who could not be seen because of the same fire. Everyone watching the news fell silent upon seeing that, although they were all surprised, especially the heroes who had a grudge against Genji, who thought he had lost, but while the flame was still there, hands came out of it with green rays surrounding it. When Izuku's hand reached Dabi's neck, he pulled him towards where Izuku's body should be, which was shown with his armor again, showing that trail and that green glow that was shown at the beginning, although this time it was blinking. When Dabi's body approached Genji's, he kneed him in the stomach and then jumped up and with his other knee, kneed Dabi in the face, causing him to raise his head from the blow with some blood and a broken nose. When Izuku's leg touched the ground, he spun on his own axis and kicked Dabi's left thigh with his right leg, causing him to almost fall to the ground. Seeing that, Izuku grabbed his linera and put it on the ground, and then with his left foot he gave Dabi a straight kick in the face, causing him to fall to the ground where only his face touched the ground. While he was against the ground, he noticed with his eyes watery from the knee he had received before how Genji was on top of him. And when he fell on top of him with both of his knees on his stomach, causing him to spit saliva, while trying to catch his breath. When Naruto fell with his knees on his stomach, he quickly rolled to the side and quickly got up and then took a few steps back and took out several shurikens which stuck in his left leg, although one of them reached Dabi's tendon, which was cut, which prevented him from being able to stand correctly as his left leg was not in good condition. When the shurikens hit quickly, Dabi threw a call to Genji, who dodged it simply by taking a step to the left while taking the hilt of his sword and unsheathing it by giving it a spin. Genji, you know, there's something I'm interested in knowing, how they took the fact that their taxi died. Dabi did not answer his words as he was trying to hit Genji with his flames, who to dodge his attacks only moved a few steps to the right or left. Genji, what does it feel like? Helplessness, weakness, despair. Dabi, my teammates will defeat you, so it doesn't matter if you beat me. Genji, ha 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 ha, I could defeat them and sit still, I could defeat them blindfolded. Dabi, you are quite arrogant. Genji, you know thinking about yourself is not bragging. Genji's steps paused for a moment as his sword began to spin in Izuku's right hand until it began to glow green. Genji, taste the dragon god's steel. After saying that quickly, Genji appeared quickly next to Dabi, who had raised his hand to throw a flame, but it was quickly cut off by an upward slash from Izuku, which had cut off Dabi's hand, who saw in slow motion how his hand was in the air, although all his sight was quickly amused to see how Genji's katana was placed on his right shoulder resting. Although he noticed the end was only preparing himself. When Dabi raised his left hand to grab the part that had been cut off by Genji, his hand flew away when he was just about to grab the cut off part, and when he looked at Genji he noticed how his sword was now on the ground, implying that I have made a downward cut. After that, Izuku jumped back slightly, and while he was in the air he put his katana on his right waist, and just when his feet touched the ground he got into a crouching position and then shot towards Dabi, who quickly moved back as far as possible, while the horizontal cut he had launched only made a cut on his throat which began to bleed. When Izuku stopped in his movement and looked at how Dabi had dodged his cut, and how he himself was trying to stop the bleeding with his forearms, which he was unable to do. Genji, all you did was prolong your inevitable death. You preferred to have a slow and painful death instead of a quick death. What an idiot. After saying that, Izuku waved his katana, causing all the blood he had to fly out and mark himself on the ground. Then he put his sword away in its sheath that was on his back. Genji, may the abyss consume you. After saying that, Genji released a smoke bomb on the ground and then disappeared from the entire place, leaving only Dabi, who was already on the ground with an empty look, and without any kind of movement, showing how he was already dead from all the blood he had lost, although it was not known what killed him first. Whether the loss of blood or the drowning of it from the cut on his throat. The helicopter that was recording everything also began to leave, while the reporter who was in the helicopter gave some comments about the fight and support for Genji. When the news broadcast ended and began to give information about other things that were completely ignored by the heroes of the meeting about the same boy who had just killed a member of the League of Villains. When the living room television turned off, everyone remained silent, although this was broken by a heroine who had a big smile on her face. "Mirko, damn, that kid is awesome." The words made everyone look at her somewhat surprised and disappointed. "Mirko, don't give me those looks, we have to be honest, the boy is good at what he does." "Ryukyu, Mirko, now is not the time to praise your skills." "Pixie Bob, I wonder how he'll look under his armor, will he be attractive?" "Empty Lady, we know you're desperate, but really? With a villain?" "Pixie, what did you say? Am I desperate? Between the two of us, you're the one who's most obsessed or desperate for attention." "Empty Lady, come and repeat it to my face." "Mandalay, okay, stop fighting, we should get serious, besides, we already know that both of you are desperate." "Empty Lady, what did you say?" "Pixie Bob, hey. All Might, his fighting style is weird." The mention of his not-so-friendly friend's fighting style caught everyone's attention, to which they looked at the peace symbol for an explanation. "All Might, you will see the style, although it seems to be a martial art, it is not." Eraserhead, did you notice it too? "Right, Mirko." "Mirko, if after all I use kickboxing, then when you see someone fight or use a martial art you can tell he doesn't use a martial art." "Midnight, if you don't use any martial arts, then what is it?" Eraserhead, his fighting style is based on analyzing his enemy, going on the offensive but being alert to dodge or block and then giving a lethal counterattack. All Might, simplifying things, he makes his plans to defeat an enemy by studying him, but when he is in a fight he can completely change his plan in question, a genius in hand-to-hand combat. Mirko, those who know how to make plans before battles, or rather bear strategists, are annoying, but those who make plans in the middle of battle are much worse, they are more annoying, and not having a martial art only proves to be even more annoying since it is even more unpredictable. All Might, this is getting complicated, I'm just getting weaker, I need to find a new successor. With the thought of needing a new successor from the symbol of peace, he made the meeting end, since no matter how much they talked about it, they would not find a plan to counterattack Genji at this time, and even less with the little information that is had about him. So the meeting would be considered finished, and in the end the only plan would be to find information about him for the moment. While the heroes separated from the meeting each to do their own things in Genji's lair at this moment, he was staring into space while Alice was fixing her armor, and Zara continued to search for even more information from other members of the League of Villains while he was in a completely dark area where he could notice how his body was surrounded by a type of black smoke which completely covered his body, only leaving the visor part of his armor which he knew was there by the green glow it gave off. "Genji, where am I?" When Izuku asked that, several figures appeared in front of him, more exactly 7, and upon seeing them he realized where he was at that moment. "Genji, former bearers, what am I doing here? I no longer have one, for all I gave it back to All Might that day they betrayed me. I no longer have anything to do in this place. I am no longer the 9th bearer, and I am not a hero." Chapter 10. At this moment Izuku did not know why he was inside the one for all with the old Ponta doors, except All Might as free in his time, although he knew that his doubts would be answered, or so he hoped, from one of the figures who came forward, unlike the others who only left in the same place where they were. When the figure got closer to Izuku, he just stared at him, waiting for some kind of response. When the figure came to stand right in front of Izuku, he raised his hand and placed it on his chest, or where Izuku's chest should be, since the smoke screen he had was there. "We know what happened, but it doesn't matter, you are, and will always be, the 9th carrier." The voice in front of him was noticeable as that of a man whose way of speaking made it clear that he did not talk much. "I'm the 6th, and you were the last one who should have gotten the one for all." "Izuku, the 6th? What do you mean by the last one?" You were supposed to be the one to end the succession, so our powers would begin to transfer to you, along with 1-for-1, which would end with all-for-1. Izuku, if that was the case, everything failed because of how things changed, right? Yes, now you don't have the power in you but not enough to use it like before, but our powers will be passed on to you, at least some mine first. Izuku, his powers? That means I'll have a quirk. Hearing that, the smoke in front of him began to disappear little by little, revealing the figure of the sixth bearer in a better way. My name is N and my quirk is called Smoke Screen, the ability to release smoke from your body. Izuku, smoke? After me one of the others will introduce himself to you, although I don't know who it will be. It could be the 4th, the 7th or the 5th user. Izuku, wait, but why am I being given this power? As I said, you were destined to be the last bearer of one for all. As such, at the moment you received it, your body began to be prepared to withstand the Opha, and so that our quirks could be transmitted to you. The ashes of the Opha are in you, but our powers are just dormant waiting to awaken. Izuki, if that's the case, I won't get the back. No and yes, you have it in you, but as I said, only ashes which can be stirred but will never ignite. Maybe the 7th can give you information, but I don't know when you will go see her. After saying that, the body of the 6th wielder began to disappear while a smoke began to join the smoke of Izuku, who only stood watching as the 6th wielder disappeared from the place while the other wielders also began to disappear until only one remained with a feminine complexion, for which he thought that she was the 7th, and for obvious reasons the Master of All Might. Izuku, Nana Shimura, I hope we see each other soon. I have many doubts. When those words left Izuku's mouth, he began to disappear while both he and the smoke that formed the figure of the Master of All Might just stared at each other until Izuku disappeared from the place and was already back in the lair where the repairs to his armor had finished. Zara/Alice, it's good to see you awake again, Master. Genji, status report. Alice, the armor has been repaired and the armor's capabilities have been improved. Genji, continue. Alice, upgrade on armor technology, that's all. Genji, state of my body. Alice, everything is normal, although there was a genetic change in your body where the plus alpha gene was intensified, giving the possibility of a quirk in your body or in development. Genji, could it be because of N's power? It wouldn't make sense that that gene would have intensified with the Opha damage? Alice, none. Genji, has this plus alpha gene intensification garnered any applause? Alice, the possibility of a quirk would be normal. Genji, I got a quirk and I have the ashes of one. Could these be the quirks you're talking about? Alice, negative. The possible awakening of one's own quirk is very likely. Genji, how likely? Alice, 84% is what I can calculate. Genji, did you know about the quirks he had? Alice, negative. We knew about the energy type quirk he has, but the second quirk he has is something new. Genji, well, the second quirk is a defensive and supportive type quirk from what I know. It consists of releasing smoke from his body to blind the sight of my enemies, although it has the same effect on me. Alice, he wants us to make improvements to his armor to minimize his quirk's weaknesses with the information we have. Genji, yes. Alice, wants the production of smoke bombs to stop. Genji, yes, let the production of smoke bombs be stopped, and those that have already been created should be lodged at the exit of the lair, and used today so that they cease to exist. Alice, right away. Genji, Alice, what improvements will you make to the armor? Alice, with the information we have about the quirk he has, to use it in the best possible way we must find a way to eliminate the weakness of not being able to see through the smoke, so we will add thermal vision to the visor of his helmet. Genji, has Zara finished the investigation? Alice, yes. Genji, okay Zara, I want you to start creating a stronger paralyzing poison that lasts 10 minutes. Zara, I'll start with the investigation. Hearing this, Genji just agreed. Genji, Alice, I want you to start with the viewer upgrade. Alice, immediately. Master, the time to finish is 1 or 2 days. He will sleep for that time. Genji, yes, let's start. After saying that, Izuku entered the capsule from which he first came out, where just by entering his mind he fell into a dream while Alice began to prepare to improve her visor. While the improvement of Izuku's suits began to take place in an old bar which at this time was still destroyed by what had happened with Izuku and Kurogiri, there were two people, exactly a man and a woman. These were Toga and Twice, who were winning in that place since they had been ordered to look for information about the new vigilante in order to finish him off and look for a way for him to become an ally. But apart from a green circle around a green sword, there was nothing that could help with the search for Genji. Which was something similar to what the heroes were doing at this time together with the best detectives in Japan, who together with the heroes were looking for everything possible to know everything about Genji. Which seemed quite difficult to them since apart from his use of his height, and the name Genji and one or two other things without much importance, they did not have much information about Genji, which made the desperation of the police, detectives and heroes who were in charge of looking for information about Genji increase more and more since they also did not know how he would react with the knowledge that they were looking for information about him. The only thing they knew was that he had some kind of hatred towards certain heroes, more exactly those of the UA and their students, or at least towards two former UA students. But apart from that, and that he had a very extremist sense of justice and a hatred of villains. They didn't know much more about Genji apart from that he apparently knew things that he shouldn't know. After all, when they reviewed everything he said, they didn't know how Bakugo Katsuki's mother and Izuku Midoriya's mother knew each other, and how they were friends. Since they had no information about that, well, not even they knew it, the only ones who could know that they were people close to the two of them, so that is the most information they had about Genji, the possibility of being a person close to them plus Inko Midoriya, a friend, a relative or an acquaintance, who knows who it would be. But to know about the friendship of both of them had to be close, at least he had to have a relationship with one of the two, and the greatest possibility was with Inko. But since she is dead, they could not know who would be capable, or who were the people close to her. So in the end they were left as at the beginning with almost no information and with more questions than answers. Time skipped 2 days. Only 2 days had passed since Genji had to undergo an equipment upgrade, and although Genji was somewhat mentally awake, he was able to form theories about what was happening with the OFA. Among all the theories he had, there was one that seemed most convincing to him, which was that using the information that N gave him, he only assumed that when the OFA was granted to him, he was given the powers of some of the former bearers, but when it was away from him, these did not go away since they were like quirks apart from the OFA together. And they were taken on in a similar way, but they were different and separate, which made them not be taken from him at the moment that All Might asked him to. When Genji woke up from his dreams, so to speak, and began to move after an inspection and status report from Alice and Zara, he checked his armor, and it didn't have any physical changes. But when he told Alice to activate the thermal vision function, everything turned white with gray and only some areas had blue, green colors, and there was even yellow, orange, and red. It was strange for Izuku to see things that way, but if he got used to that vision, many things would become easier in his missions. Now the only thing left for him was to start training and start looking for a way to use his quirk in the best possible way. Everything would be in an even more favorable situation for him. After all, he had only shown the use of smoke bombs when he went out, not in battle, so there is no one who would prepare for this. The possibility of a battle within an area full of smoke and with completely zero visibility, or at least very little. I had some knowledge about N's quirk which happened to me, but that was too little for the way to use it in a better way to be inside his head, so he could only start using it to gain experience with it. Genji, Zara, who is the next target? Zara, the research I've been doing has given 3 of the most optimal targets, and 2 of them mostly receive missions together. Genji, 3? Which ones are they? Zara, Toga, Twice, and Mr. Compress. Genji, which ones go together? Zara, Toga, and Twice. Genji, give me the information on those 2. Zara, immediately the information will be on your viewer of both villains. Genji, thank you. So the next ones to fall will be them. Well, it doesn't matter, they will only be 2 less obstacles that will be eliminated from my path in the end. They asked for it by joining the League of Villains. Chapter 11. At this moment, Izuku, after knowing about the 3 people he could go after and knowing that he could eliminate 2 members of the Villain League in a single attack, chose to go against them. Toga and Twice were not the ones he knew the most, but thanks to Zara he had some files with which it would be easy to know most of the necessary things about them, videos where they appear and you can see how they fight, photos for their appearances in a better way, and assumptions about how their quirks work. Apart from the fact that he came to have direct contact with them, especially with Toga and her madness and strange fondness for his blood. The last time he saw her he talked about his blood, although now it would be almost impossible for her. Even if she knew he was Izuku, she wouldn't have many chances to draw blood from him with the armor, besides the fact that the only parts of him with blood were his torso and his face. And although she could try to get a more human type of body with the technology of the place, she didn't know to what point this technology could go. With his armor she could come to the conclusion that at least the limbs would be similar to human ones, but the fact that they were similar didn't mean that they would be good. After all, it is different to make a prosthesis and to make a prosthesis which would be a limb similar to a human's, and although it is true that he could put Zara and Alice to investigate this possibility of these advanced technological super prostheses in the end, did he want to return to being like before? What good would it do? A life like before? Was it necessary? Would it be the same? His attitude, his thoughts, his way of seeing life, or rather the world, was completely different. Before he saw everything with a positive look, and now that positivism is no longer there. It's not as if he had gone from a positive attitude to a pessimistic one, but now he was more neutral. Rather, his words were realistic. He was now a realistic person. He knew that the way he wanted to change things would be strange and possibly very complicated, but it was the way in which he saw that things could work in a better way than what is happening in these times. After all, fear has always been an element to take into account which should be exploited as a product. Leaving aside the ramblings, Izuku only thought about what he thought of the possible improvement of the prosthetics to the point of being a body again. Even if he did that, using his armor would be impossible, although he still had his other armor, and that another one is more for a human body. Some changes would still have to be made for that change of his own body, since instead of being an armor, it would have to become a suit. Making his decision, Izuku entrusted Zara with the investigation of the probabilities on the possibility of that change and also on the benefits of doing that. With that done, Izuku just left the place. He left his lair. He had been 2 days without leaving, and he needed to maintain the fear in his presence in the city so that what he had already achieved would not be lost by that little break he had to take for the improvement. To which he left the lair and quickly arrived at the city with his motorcycle, which he left outside the city, since having it in the city would only be a foolish decision with all the people who were investigating him. When Genji got off his motorcycle, he jumped and began to move through the upper areas of the city while looking for everything that was conflicts to stop or some criminal to stop, while Alice looked for the possibility of finding Toga and twice to finish them off. All the time Genji was looking for some criminal who was worse off. As if luck came into his life, he caught 2 of his targets, although his luck also played a bad trick on him that day, since at the moment he noticed his 2 targets, he also found that 2 heroes went to confront his presence at the place. But that was not the important thing. Twice, Toga and anyone who tried to stop him would be eliminated, would be destroyed by the steel of his sword. When he looked at them carefully, he could see that the heroes of the place were 2 well known, 2 very interesting heroines. Mirko and Ryukyu, the rabbit heroine and the dragon respectively. Normally he would make a plan to defeat them as quickly as possible and escape the place a few seconds later, but in those moments Izuku couldn't help but have a great excitement for a fight, so with his thoughts running in one direction he jumped towards the ground where the 2 sides were arguing before the battle, which before it started was stopped by the sudden appearance of the most famous and most beloved vigilante of all time. The first reaction was surprise, followed by disbelief and then turning to mockery, the latter being demonstrated mostly by the rabbit girl. "Mirko, you're not very smart, are you? There are 4 people here who want to catch you." Genji, Alice, I hope you're recording this, it'll be interesting to blow it up on the internet. The heroes join the villains. Hey, I'm not going to stop, there could be many more, but don't forget that David was able to defeat Goliath. After saying that, Genji's sword began to be unsheathed by him slowly. Mirko, villains, right now the best thing would be to unite. Toga, I wonder what his blood tastes like. Genji, you can try testing it. Toga quickly pulled out his knife and ran towards Genji and attacked with a cut to his stomach, or where he should be, since Genji quickly moved away by taking a few steps back and then throwing a cut with his sword which collided with Toga's knife, which quickly crouched down to sweep her legs where Genji jumped on it, and then released his sword to take a stop with both hands that came from Mirko. Using her strength, she propelled herself towards Mirko while he was in the air. By grabbing his leg already in front of her, he avoided a blow from Ryukyu with Mirko's body, which together with him was thrown to a wall by Ryukyu's force. But just like the initial blow, the wall was not a problem when she used Mirko again as a barrier, and then quickly jumped towards Ryukyu but was stopped by a clone of Twice which attacked him, but he was eliminated when in a quick movement he had a shuriken crossing his forehead. He couldn't witness the beautiful sight when he felt Toga attack him from behind, so he quickly moved to the side and grabbed Toga's arm and headbutted him in the face as he brought Toga's body closer to him by means of his arm. After that, he quickly grabbed Toga by the waist and held her close to his body, which prevented her from trying to stab him with her knife in one of his arms with the arm that Genji was not holding. When Toga was going to say something, Genji pushed her a little so that she would move away from her body, and then he launched a kick which hit Toga in the face, which sent her against another Twice clone. Quickly Genji jumped back, dodging the claws of a dragon, and at that Genji only heard laugh. Genji, taste the steel of the... Before he could finish his sentence, Mirko's save stopped him and sent him crashing into a wall, which he went through. When he got up from the ground inside the house, he quickly cleaned the dust and looked at the damage, which although it was little there was one which was not very good, so Izuku just sighed and left the house while patting his shoulder a little as if removing dust, which achieved its purpose, which was to annoy Mirko, who jumped to give him another stop, which was dodged by Genji by taking a step to the right. That didn't stop Mirko, who placed one leg on the ground and turned around trying to give another kick, but this time a spinning kick to Genji, who bent down and then grabbed Mirko by her shoulders and squeezed them, which made her kneel in pain. Genji, you know, there's a phrase that I really like to say, but how about we raise the level a little bit? While he was saying that in Mirko's ear, he began to whisper to her again. Genji, appreciating the wrath of the dragon god. Those words were enough to see how a large part of Genji's body began to shine as they had seen many times, but this time in a stronger way, and with it a black smoke began to come out of his body which began to cover a large part of the place where the three sides were fighting. When the smoke began to reach the level that covered almost all of Genji's bodies, it was noticed how his posture dropped a little, and he was completely covered by the smoke, which prevented them from seeing him. When the smoke reached a higher level they heard it, and in a moment a rumble resonated in the place, a characteristic sound of something they have heard a few times, the sound of a body traveling at extreme speeds, and those times it was when seeing All Might or Ingenium. After that the only thing they could hear was something crashing into something else. The two heroines were confused while a villain was trying to see where she was. While that was happening with the three girls with Twice, he was literally being used as a punching bag. One of Genji's hands was on his neck while the other as a fist crashed into his face again and again and again at speeds that were impossible for him to see. When the smoke covered everything Twice, the only thing he could see was how the smoke moved irregularly, and then he found himself slammed against a wall which was almost broken while a hand was holding him by his neck and a fist began to hit him in the face without any mercy. After having given himself several dozen blows, Genji stopped for a moment to see Twice's barely visible face, barely visible because of the smoke and the mask which was somewhat broken from so many blows. Blood was coming out of it when Genji stopped hitting him. He thought about leaving it close to the heroes so that they would hurt him just like Toga to make fear help him more in this battle. But those plans went to waste when clones began to emerge from Twice's body. They made more clones, which made more clones, and so on until Genji was surrounded. Even though Izuku couldn't see it, he knew that Twice was smiling under the mask, which made him sigh. Genji, what a waste, I wanted to leave you alive. Right after seeing that, Izuku just squeezed the neck until it made a breaking sound and then let Twice's body fall to the ground. Chapter 12. When the sound stopped being heard and the only thing in the place that they could hear was their breathing and the few movements they made in the place, Mirko and Ryukyu became desperate for this reason, and of the two it was Mirko more than anything since she had confidence in what her ears could hear, which at this moment were nothing. All seen by Genji, who, although he could not see any expressions or anything from what he could see thermally with his visor, noticed the discomfort of the heroines while Toga, well, she didn't know what she was doing, but it didn't matter. In the end she would be the last to fall. With his plan already made, Genji took Twice's body in his arms and threw it to the heroines while he threw a shuriken from behind the body. When Mirko noticed the sound of something coming, she didn't move and waited for it to arrive, but to her dismay, it fell a little far from her, which caused the smoke to continue covering it. Together with Ryukyu, she began to approach, and when they reached the object that was thrown, they could see a shuriken first, and then the body of one of the villains they had confronted before the vigilante arrived. They didn't worry much about the wounds on her face, even Mirko herself would have done something similar, but the fact that her neck was somewhat badly positioned was not a very good sign. With the silence in the place, and now with the information that one of the villains had died without them being able to do anything, they were upset and scared a little by that, but they did not show it, or at least not much. Genji, they understand they don't stand a chance. The voice echoing through the place reached the heroines along with Toga, who was far away from them, and did not know about her partner's situation. Genji, they don't stand a chance. So they could see that the voice was now from a different place than the first time. Genji, let me take Toga without problems, you won't die, I'm leaving, good deal, right? The two heroines, although they wanted to, responded with a no, and would not allow it. They were completely tied hand and foot, although they did not want to. They were in a place with little visibility, which was why they were at a disadvantage. If they left the place to be able to get out and have visibility, Genji could take advantage and take Toga while continuing to hide in the smoke. They wanted to give Genji the opportunity to succeed in his goal, but his chances of winning were minimal, and that was being optimistic. While they were thinking, Genji took his sword from the ground where it had been left when he dropped it, while it was covered in a green color. After that he threw a few shuriken at both heroines, which as he thought separated to dodge the shuriken. Now with the three girls separated, all his work was easy. Genji, escape, fight, survive, low chances. What do they decide? What option will they take? Toga, this is so cool. Internally Izuku smiled at that and then dodged a kick from Mirko which went past, although he could see Genji's green flash in the place. Although the fact that it went past the place fire did not prevent it from taking a cut from Genji's sword in its feet, more exactly its tendon, which made it so that when it fell to the ground it could not move one of its feet properly, which made one of its best weapons, its kicks, impossible. Genji, the bunny has fallen. Who will be next, the little dragon or the little vampire? Mirko, I haven't fallen. The sound, although somewhat loud, which was heard around the place, could not protect the sound of pain that she released. Genji, then why are you on the ground? Or maybe instead of a carrot to eat. The constant mockery and the fact of knowing that his partner had fallen made Ryukyu transform back into his dragon form and with his wings began to try to disperse the smoke, which was not such a good idea since upon seeing it, Izuku only began to create more and more smoke, which made Ryukyu only help him disperse to more and more places, making everything easier for him. Genji, the little dragon is desperate. How cute, you have it easy. Little dragon, give up, you take Mirko and I take Toga, easy without problems and quite simple, right? When Genji finished he moved his head to the side as a knife passed close to his face while the sight of a Toga in front of him gave himself away. Before any movement, Toga's hand withdrew and he attacked Genji again with his knife, slashing his neck, which was also dodged by Genji. After that a variety of cuts began to be thrown at Genji, who only dodged them until he got tired, and with his sword he cut Toga's knife, and after that a second knife that Toga took with which he attacked Genji's chest, which with his sword he deflected his knife, and after that he pierced Toga's neck with his sword which was stuck up to the hilt, while his helmet began to open, starting to show his face. When his helmet opened completely and revealed some of Izuku's green hair along with his emerald green eyes, Toga's face turned completely red while one of his hands rose and touched Izuku's body, and then with difficulty with his other hand he brought it to Izuku's face. Izuku, goodbye. After those last words Genji pulled his sword out of Toga's throat and then spun around on its own axis and slashed, detaching Toga's head from his own head, causing quite a bit of blood to start coming out of the now two parts of Toga, which would have fallen to the ground if it weren't for the fact that Genji grabbed Toga's head in the air and then dropped it on the ground while his body had already fallen and was creating a pool of blood on the ground. After leaving Toga's head on the ground, Izuku got up from it and began to walk to where he knew the houses were to leave the place. There was no reason to kill someone who hadn't done anything wrong. When he left the place, the smoke began to rise from the place where the heroines, and now the bodies of the villains were. When the heroines had a complete view of the place, they saw Toga's body and her head, which, although she had a smile, they could not help but wanted to vomit when they heard the scene of the head of a girl falling off, who, although a villain, did not deserve such an ugly death. While that was happening with the heroines, Izuku was already far away from the place, more exactly on top of a building looking at the city from it. Alice, Master? Are you okay? Izuku, yes. Alice, don't you feel bad? Izuku, tough decisions require strong wills. Alice, I see now. What will you do, Master? Izuku, it's time to end this war. Look, I want to know where Tamura Shirogaki and All for One are. Let's destroy them. Alice, right away, Master. Just saying that, and Alice stopped talking, and Izuku was left alone looking at the city while he was in his thoughts. Every thought that was going on in his mind was stopped so he could watch as more heroes and police began to arrive in the place he had left, so he sat on the edge of the building while he watched what was happening. Although that was put aside for a moment because of a certain situation that had to be fixed. Izuku, Zara, are you? Zara, what's happening, Master? Izuku, I need an arrangement. While saying this, he looked at how his chest had a small dent. Zara, the repair room will begin immediately. Izuku, thank you. After those last words, Izuku stood up and jumped off the roof he was on while sliding down the building to reach the ground, where Izuku got on his motorcycle to start leaving the place while he kept looking around and listening to the police radios to see if I have heard any kind of criminal act by someone. While Izuku was on his motorcycle, he asked Alice to investigate his next target, which was Mr. Compress, the guy who seemed like a magician if she remembered correctly. That one was dangerous, so instead of trying to have a battle where he would play like it was with Twice and Toga, this time he would go for a quick and stealthy death to avoid problems. All thought was completely stopped by a certain heroine who had already fought with Izuku, who was currently interfering in her path. Genji, it's good to see you, Empty Lady, and I see you've fixed your outfit since last time. Empty, in his giant form, being able to hear him, only frowned as he moved his hand closer to Genji's motorcycle, which quickly moved from the spot. Genji, hey, calm down, but how aggressive. Empty Lady, I'll stop you right now. Genji, why would I do that? I just want to finish off the League of Villains and I'm missing a few. Empty Lady, how many will you kill for your mission to be completed? Genji, with those I have 7, few compared to those they killed, and as such only 3 are missing, Mr. Compress Shirogaki and of course the most important AFO. Empty Lady, why kill someone who is already in jail? Genji, simple, the only way for the darkness to go away is for its pillars to start falling. Empty Lady, I'm sorry, but I won't allow you. Genji, so many have tried to stop me, so many I have killed and so many I have fought, and none have achieved anything. If you fight you will lose, so I don't want to waste time. Alice, sir, I have already found the information you requested. Genji, well, tell me you know where it is. Alice, yes. Genji, let's stop playing and finish them all at once. Zara looks for Shirogaki and Alice looks for the best way to get to AFO. Zara, immediately. Alice, right away, and the location is already on your map. Genji, you know, Empty Lady, I was planning to go slower, but I'm already getting bored with this whole game, so let's increase the speed in my plans. Speeding up on his bike, Izuku passed by Empty Lady and continued on his way at full speed while Empty Lady was following him, trying to catch Izuku, who was using the streets to his advantage by making turns and going through alleys, which made Empty Lady have to be careful not to harm any civilians, which at some point became impossible, so he stopped. Following Izuku, who continued on his way to where Mr. Compress was. With his path already directed by the computer, Izuku began to take out his sword and began to look at it until he put it away again, and then took out some shurikens so he could see them. All his concentration was when Izuku felt something drag him, so he closed his eyes for a few seconds, and when he opened them he was in front of 2 shadows which he knew were former bearers. Before he could say anything, one of the shadows entered his body and no longer appeared while the other only revealed itself to Izuku. Izuku 7th. Nana, Izuku, the truth is I don't like your decision, but even if I don't like your ways I can't deny the results. The one who got into you was a carrier who gave you his quirk, which is about black whips which you can control at will, although be careful, they can get out of control if you don't know how to use them. Izuku, looking at his hands, noticed something strange came out of them, which was black with green touches on its edges. Nana, come on. When he said that, Izuku looked at Nana, surprised by that request, but when he saw her approach to him, Izuku stayed still, so he received a hug from Nana, who before leaving gave him a kiss on the forehead. Nana, you can levitate with me. I don't like what you're doing, but if it's what you think is right, follow it to the end. 9th. When Nana disappeared, Izuku just stayed in that black space until something caught his attention, and that was a golden light which he saw something far away from him, while next to him another shadow appeared, letting him know that it was another carrier. Izuku, do you know what that is? Bearer. Apparently the 8th gave the one for all to someone again, but... Izuku, but... Bearer, the power I gained is so minuscule that even entering this place is a very difficult thing. Izuku, can we know who it is? Carrier, not until I get to this place, but when I get there I will bring you. Izuku, thank you. Disappearing from that place, Izuku returned to reality, and found himself in an alley still on top of his motorcycle. Alice, Master, is it okay? He fell asleep, so I stopped the bike and brought him to this place. Izuku, yeah, I'm fine, we should continue. Chapter 13. Arriving at the area where Mr. Compress should be, Izuku got off his motorcycle and using his new ability he began to rise in the air as if he were a little god. Rising into the sky, Izuku didn't stop until he was very, very high, as he said he wouldn't fight Mr. Compress, so it would be something quick. He would kill him, he would go for AFO and then for Shigaraki, and everything would end, his objective and mission would be completed. When he was high enough, he looked at where Mr. Compress should be, and standing in the exact spot, Izuku deactivated his ability, which made him start to plummet with his sword pointing at the ground. While Izuku fell to the ground in another house, you could see a guy eating a sandwich while watching television, where it was shown how the Justice Genji had killed Toga and twice and had faced some heroes who had joined the villains to stop him. Mr. Compress, that's bad, maybe I should leave the league, I don't want to die. As he was already reaching the roof of the house where Izuku was going to fall, he gritted his teeth and grabbed his sword tighter as it began to glow and pierce the roof. Hearing a very loud sound as if an explosion came from the floor above, Mr. Compress looked at the ceiling, which broke, and Genji appeared with his sword, which was about to touch Mr. Compress, who opened his eyes in surprise, and his mouth, as well as his eyes, which had some food inside it. Food which he felt like a sword entered the same mouth they were in, and it opened a hole through which to exit through the throat of Mr. Compress, who had a sword piercing his throat, while the sword was stuck in the ground, and the only thing that was left of his body was his vertical spine, because his body was on the ground with his head separated. With an Izuku on top of him, who got up. Izuku, damn, it wasn't the best idea. Putting one of his hands on Mr. Compress's head, Izuku opened his mask hand and took the sandwich that Mr. Compress was eating and finished it. Then put pressure on Mr. Compress's head until he lowered it to the ground, where he stopped putting his hand and used his foot, while his hands were on the sword, which he took out like Arthur with Excalibur or Optimus Prime with his sword. Leaving Mr. Compress's house like a normal person through the east door, he began to fly after jumping and went to where the Tartar prison was, while Alice told him how he could enter it without having many problems. When Izuku arrived at the prison, using his great communication skills, he decided that the simplest and easiest way to enter was to fly above the prison and fill it with smoke until he could enter, continuing to fill the prison with smoke until he reached the top floor, which was underground, where All for One was. When he saw him enter, he couldn't help but smile, although it wasn't noticeable due to his strange and ugly face. AFO, look who do we have here. Genji, your executioner, so close your mouth, you disgusting and repulsive head of a badly done abortion. Taking out his sword, which was already shining, Izuku lowered his helmet so that AFO could see it. Izuku, last words to the former successor and the 8th bearer. AFO, you a damn, you screwing up my plans over and over and over again. Genji, yes, 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 ancient symbol of fear, I present myself as the symbol of justice, so die. With his anger in AFO's direction, black and green whips came out of Izuku's hands, which took AFO and took him towards him, where with his sword he cut his body in half and then again cut it in half and then repeat that again 2 more times. Making a movement with his sword which made a beautiful sound which showed how it cut through the air, the blood that was on his sword spread all over the wall and the floor of the hallway that Izuku was crossing in order to get out of the prison, which he achieved without any kind of resistance. When he walked out the main door of the prison, he met many heroes, and in front of them all was All Might, who was looking at him. The news helicopters were in the air capturing everything that was happening. Genji, AFO, and no longer there is only one left, you are the next Tamura Shiragaki. Next to All Might was a girl with yellow hair and blue eyes who was known to Izuku as Melissa Shield, while behind them were many other heroes and the students of Class A and B. All Might, surrender, villain, we won't let you pass. Genji, but just look at who we have here, All Might, and who is she? Your successor? The new one? You changed your successor so quickly? What happened to Izuku Midoriya? He All Might? So tell me what happened, Melissa Shield, what happened, ninth bearer? With small green rays coming out of Izuku's leather, he pointed his finger at both of them. Melissa, why, how do you know about One for All? Genji, ha 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 ha, how do I know about that? Slowly Izuku's mask began to open until it revealed green eyes and green hair. Izuku, because me, I'm the 8th bearer. Class A Izuku. Genji, indeed, now get out of the way. Alright, Joe Young Midoriya, I will not allow you to advance any further. Genji, tell me, Melissa, haven't you noticed a lack of power? Even though you haven't had it for a long time, you only have almost no power except a little improvement. Melissa, if that happens. Genji, when All Might took One for All from me, he eliminated the power. He couldn't have it, it wasn't his anymore, but they took it from me, so where did it go? Melissa, in? Genji, nowhere, it no longer exists, it's gone. While All Might has a little piece of charcoal, and you have a white piece of charcoal, I have the ashes. Rising slowly into the air, Izuku drew his sword as some smoke began to rise from his body. Izuku, symbol of peace, I will tell you something similar to what I told All for One. Peace and fear are strong symbols, I accept it, but in the end the symbol of justice is the only one that will endure. Closing his helmet and making his visor shine in power at full volume, Izuku shouted to the sky. Izuku, you killed Izuku, and from there Genji was born. Coming down to the ground, the lightning bolt surrounded Izuku more than before, and he ran towards the heroes who got ready. But from one moment to the next, Genji disappeared from the sight of most due to the increase in speed. While the battle began on television throughout Japan, it was shown how a clash between the fists of All Might and Genji created a huge massive wave of air which caused many heroes to fly away. Dodging All Might's fist, causing it to pass over his shoulder, the air hit the prison while Izuku counterattacked and hit All Might in the face, causing him to fly backwards, and then with his left hand he stopped Melissa's blow, bringing her closer to his body and kneeing him, using it to shield himself against Mirko's stop, causing him to jump back while Kaminari tried to use his electricity to damage him, but with one of the smoke bombs he had and no longer needed, he dodged the attack by using it as a lightning bolt, having metal in its smoke. So when it exploded at Kaminari's feet, he electrocuted himself. Jumping to the right, he dodged an ice spike from Todoroki and then crouched like Matrix in one of Lita's kicks, which was grabbed by the leg by Izuku, who put him in a lock, causing both of them to fall to the ground, where Izuku got up quickly and with a stop he knocked Lita out. Dodging 3 shots from the snipe hero, he felt pain in one of his hands and noticed that he had 2 shurikens in it, so he wondered when he had thrown them. Dodging a blow from Mt. Lady Izuku passed under her fist and near her legs, he used his new power, the whips, to wrap his arms around her, and with his whips he also wrapped his feet around her, and doing everything he could, he made Mt. Lady fell to the ground, where he almost crushed some heroes who were able to escape from Mt. Lady, but not from Izuku, who hit each of them, knocking them unconscious. When Izuku dodged Momo's attack, who was attacking him with a sword, he noticed Mineta behind him, who was about to use his strange balls to catch him, so he waited for him to use them. When Izuku passed, he jumped, causing Momo to be trapped, who stared with hatred at Mineta, who was crushed by Izuku, who fell on top of him, and then, taking out his sword, he cut Momo's sword with a single slash as if it were butter. With some fear, Momo looked at Izuku, who put away his sword and put one of his fingers in his mouth and then jumped to the right, dodging Aizawa's bandages, while Momo watched as Izuku spun on the ground and then jumped and in the air performed a perfect split, thus stopping two heroes while remaining in the air as if they were Madara. With a blush on her face, Momo did nothing and gave up as she continued to watch Izuku fight the heroes, although an image came to her mind as if it were a dance. Taking out his sword, Izuku began to spin it, managing to cut the 9 bullets that were fired by Snipe. Turning on its own axis, Izuku put away his sword and gave a spinning kick which collided with Mirko's spinning stop, which he did not win, and his foot was launched in the direction that Izuku's kick was directed, which was taken advantage of by Izuku, who grabbed Mirko by the neck, and after headbutting her he turned her around and hugged her, which made her blush, but that did not last long when a German suplex was applied to her and knocked her out. Izuku was quick to get back up and continued to knock out heroes, both professional and Class A and B. The great massacre was seen by all of Japan, who looked with pity at the heroes who were falling, although some looked enviously at Genji for having made heroines blush, who were seen as very beautiful by civilians. That envy they had gone away when they saw how Izuku broke both of Snipe's guns and grabbed him by the neck to then lift him into the air and smash him against MT Lady's fist, which was intended for Izuku, who stopped it with Snipe's body. Chapter 14. Releasing a bucked up and unconscious Snipe, Izuku looked at MT Lady, who had an apologetic face, but by keeping her fist where Izuku was, she took the opportunity to climb up it, and when she reached her shoulder she jumped onto her face, where she stayed on her nose, where she looked at MT Lady, who was not able to do much, began to choose, which Izuku took advantage of to grab her by the waist when they reached the ground and stick her to his body. MT Lady, be gentle. Genji: of course, if my lady. With that said, Izuku with his other hand took MT Lady's hand and began to do the waltz steps, dodging attacks from many heroes in the process, while MT Lady was next to him. At one point Izuku spun MT Lady around and pressed her back against his chest, and with one of his hands which he placed on her neck he made her look up, where Izuku opened his mask and winked at her. Izuku: good evening, my lady. Separating her a little, Izuku hit her in the neck, which left her unconscious, so he left her on the ground to dodge some claws which were from Ryukyu. Taking several leaps, Izuku moved away from all the remaining heroes, although his vision went away when everything went black and he found that he was now where the bearers should be. But there was only him, and it was green and black smoke, while in front of him was some yellow smoke which, when it disappeared, just like the smoke, showed Melissa, who looked at him too. Melissa, Izuku? Izuku, what do you want? Melissa, where are we? Izuku, inside the One for All. Just after saying that, all the remaining carriers appeared and surrounded them. Melissa: please, carriers, help me make Izuku reconsider. Izuku: that won't happen. Melissa: why? Izuku: because I'm the 8th. After saying that, all the carriers stood behind Izuku and began to disappear little by little. Izuku by Melissa. Waking up, Izuku watched as he hit Aizawa in the face, who fell to the ground. Alice, Master falling asleep, takes control and eliminates several heroes. Genji: thank you, it's time to move on. Taking a big leap, which was seen by Melissa, who also woke up and saw how Izuku prepared a blow, so she shouted for everyone to wake up. When Izuku hit the ground and struck, a large crater was created, which was illuminated by green fire which came out of all the fruits that were made. Genji: taste the wrath of the dragon god. With the rays increasing in size, Izuku disappeared due to his speed and appeared in front of All Might, whom he hit in the face, which knocked him out and launched him backwards. Then he disappeared and appeared behind Todoroki and Endeavor. He hit Endeavor while he sent Todoroki flying, covered in burns from Izuku's green fire. Alice, Master, I found Shigaraki Tamura, he's leaving the city. Turning to see where Alice said Shiragaki was, Izuku grew red as his rays began to make a gigantic noise and the green parts of his body shone brighter. Everyone knew his gaze was somewhere, and everyone could guess what he was looking at, and that was just one thing more important than the Shigaraki battle. Before anyone could come to stop him, Izuku shot out like lightning in the direction he was looking. While the heroes were looking at the place where Genji was before, and then seeing all those who fell on the outskirts of the city, there was a Shigaraki who was walking outwards since he knew that the heroes would buy him time, so he was quite happy, although he was angry about the death of his master, so he was beginning to create a plan to get revenge on Genji, or rather Izuku, that bastard who had stopped him on many occasions. Continuing on his walk, Shigaraki was not paying attention to his surroundings, so he did not notice when what looked like a lightning bolt came behind him. Suddenly, a circle of green fire appeared around Shigaraki and Izuku, which was quite large, which brought Shigaraki back to reality, who had never seen green fire before, so he turned around, finding himself facing someone he didn't want to see. Shigaraki Izuku. Genji, feel lucky, I will have mercy on you, and just like your master you will die quickly. Shigaraki, why do you think I'll be the one who dies here? Izuku, it's pretty simple, the reason you'll die here is because I have the upper hand, so. When he finished saying that, several shurikens stuck in Shigaraki's legs, who fell to the ground in pain. Genji, well done, I see that you want me to cut off your head. Well, I split your master's body in half. I suppose everyone has their own ways of wanting to die. Shigaraki, do you really think this will be enough to kill me? Using his hands to destroy the shurikens, Shigaraki got up from the ground and looked at Genji, who turned his sword slightly in his hands. Genji, your face already looks like it's gone with so many wrinkles. I wonder what you'll look like when the blood comes out like a fountain when my sword separates your head from your body. Disappearing and appearing in front with his sword stored, Genji gave Shigaraki a blow which broke his nose. Genji, come on, since you didn't accept my mercy, I'll show you despair. Note, I'm craving some alligator tacos. Moving again, Izuku disappeared while Shigaraki tried to do his best to keep up with Izuku's speed, which he failed to do, which was noticed when Izuku appeared in front of him, only crouching, and with the palm of his hand he hit him below the chin, which lifted Shigaraki's body into the air, where Izuku took the opportunity to put his legs on his shoulders, and in true wrestling style he slammed his back against the ground to quickly get away from Shigaraki so he couldn't get close to using his quirk on him. Approaching Shigaraki already standing up, Izuku kicked him in the rib, and after putting his foot on the ground, he turned around and kicked him again with his other leg. When Shigaraki was left holding his ribs, Izuku took the opportunity to grab his head and crash his knee into his face, earning a beautiful breaking sound like when you squeeze or break a chicken bone from the chicken's leg. Note, I'm sorry but I'm hungry, haha. With his final spinning kick he sent Shigaraki to the ground, where he was taking a while to get up, so Izuku whistled the Spider-Man song. Getting close enough while Shigaraki put his hands on the ground to get up doing a lizard pose, Izuku gave him a stop on the face which returned him to the ground, where Izuku took the opportunity to take out his sword, give it a few spins to give style to life, and cut Shigaraki's hands, giving that seasoning to the pavement, although it was missing a pinch of freshly ground black pepper. Lifting him by the collar of his suit even though he was screaming in pain, Izuku stood him up and looked at him with a smile on his face before making an X with his hands. Right after, Izuku performed a split on the ground and raised his fist, hitting Shigaraki between his legs. The sound that Shigaraki made Izuku cover his own crotch, while the heroes who were helping everyone who fell in battle did exactly the same, already bored of harming Shigaraki since he already knew that some bones were broken and he had internal injuries which only gave him at most an hour to live or even less. So he already knew that he had to finish quickly, so taking Shigaraki by the shoulders, Izuku gave him a headbutt which made him fall to the ground. Already on the ground, Izuku stepped on Shigaraki with all his strength, obtaining another beautiful breaking sound while Shigaraki's mouth began to leak blood. Lifting Shigaraki up again, Izuku decided to have mercy again since he had already gone too far. It was noticeable that he was suffering, and if it weren't for him, getting up would be impossible for Shigaraki. Genji, say hello to Yefo. Pulling his sword from his back and giving it a spin, Bell got close enough to Shigaraki to stick the sword down his throat and pull it out through the top of his head. After that, taking the hilt tightly, he broke Shigaraki's neck by destroying his neck and finally pulling out the sword, and after a spin he decapitated Shigaraki, making his head fly through the air until he fell to the ground, where he began to leave his little carcass of blood. With the glow of his suit fading, Izuku approached Shigaraki's head, crushing it with his foot before beginning to walk back to the city, while his sword was put away after being cleaned with a slash in the air. End of story.
Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.